Chapter 83. Ning Chen admitted that he was just letting his imagination run wild, but he didn't expect that his imagination would come true. However, after a short moment of surprise, Ning Chen gradually calmed down. He knew that Prince Yan only cared about the sword, and he couldn't accept this girl. In the open space, the young men all looked unconvinced, but they didn't dare to act presumptuously here. On the high platform, the beautiful girl walked down shyly. She went forward and hung the red ribbon in her hand on the arm of the person she liked to show her feelings. The crowd immediately clapped. This was the most beautiful pearl of their tribe, and she deserved the warmest blessings. The show is over. Let's go, Prince Yan said indifferently, looking as calm as ever. He turned around without a trace of reluctance, as if what had just happened hadn't been reflected in his eyes at all. The red ribbon and the embroidered ball slid down and fell to the ground silently. They floated in the wind and rolled, but they still couldn't make the person turn around to look back. Ning Chen sighed inwardly and also turned his wheelchair to leave. In this world, lovers couldn't always be together, let alone heartless people. Senior was a Xiantian, a diviner. He was a peerless genius who had entered the fourth tribulation of the Xiantian realm in less than 30 years of cultivation. How could he be tied down by worldly feelings? The beautiful girl was stunned. Looking at the red ribbon and the embroidered ball on the ground, she couldn't come back to her senses. Men, stop them. At this moment, an old man with a white beard walked out and said with a gloomy expression, "Yes, sir." As he spoke, more than 10 big and sturdy grassland men rushed out and quickly chased after the two. However, just as they were about to approach the two, they felt an irresistible force and were all sent flying. Warriors! The old man with a white beard narrowed his eyes. He knew that these two people weren't simple, but the Qiu tribe's reputation couldn't be tarnished either. He couldn't just let this matter go. Ming Cheng, stop them! The old man with a white beard shouted with a serious expression. Yes, sir. Before he finished speaking, a man in black with a machete at his waist appeared. He stamped his feet and turned into a black shadow that swept towards the two. Clang! The sword and saber met, blocking the path of the black-clothed man. Ning Chen exerted force in his hand and pushed the former away. He frowned unconsciously. Seeing the scimitar in the black-clothed man's hand, he suddenly remembered that when Zhang Sun was attacked, the assassins had used scimitars like this. In this world, there were not many people who used scimitars, and the moon-shaped scimitar in the hands of the black-clothed man was even rarer. On the other side, the man in black moved again. His machete slashed across like a slanted moon, silently approaching. Bang! There was a loud collision, and the dust and sand around the two of them were thrown into a frenzy. However, there was a clear cracking sound, and a very obvious crack appeared on the wheels of the wheelchair. Ning Chen frowned again. He focused his left hand into a finger and aimed it at the man's chest. In the instant of contact, 70% of the force was withdrawn and 30% penetrated the man's body. The black-robed man let out a muffled groan and was sent flying. He retreated a few steps and then spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes withered. "Senior, we won't be leaving for now," said Ning Chen. "What's the matter?" Prince Yan stopped and asked. "Yes," Ning Chen nodded and answered. He wanted to confirm whether the assassins of Zhang Sun had anything to do with the black-clothed man in front of him. Moreover, his wheelchair was almost broken and needed to be repaired. The wheelchair that Mr. Liu of the academy had made for him had been destroyed in the explosion. The one he was sitting on was bought with Prince Yan's money from a merchant in northern Meng. Now it seemed that it was indeed very fragile. The wheelchair creaked. The two of them turned around and walked back to the white-bearded elder. "Greetings, old sir." Ning Chen smiled brightly and bowed in greeting. "Arrest them," the white-bearded elder shouted with a darkened face. More than 10 men struggled to get up from the ground and immediately surrounded the two of them. They looked fearful and did not dare to move forward. "No need to arrest us. We won't resist," Ning Chen said with a smile. "You decide how to deal with them," the white-bearded elder looked at the woman not far away and said in a low voice. "Take them back to the tent first," Pei Yan, who had been silent, said softly. Ning Chen and Prince Yan did not have any objections. They obediently followed the escorting men to the tent where they were locked up. Most of the tribes on the grassland lived a nomadic life. They lived in tents that could be easily moved. Ning Chen and Prince Yan entered. Looking at the furnishings, it did not look like a place for prisoners, but more like a place for guests. It seemed that the girl had a good heart. Even if she was angry, she would not go too far. Speaking of which, half of the fault this time was on them. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. They only followed the clothes of the Romans, but still could not accept other things. "Why did you stay?" Prince Yan walked to the table and poured himself a cup of tea. He asked calmly. "I felt that the machete in the black-clothed man's hand was very similar to the weapons used by those who assassinated the Empress," Ning Chen answered seriously. At that time, he had suspected many people, including the royal court of Northern Meng, the Eternal Night sect, and the one in the West Palace. Now it seemed that it was the people of Northern Meng who did it. Since it was done by the royal court of Northern Meng, it must have something to do with Fan Lingyue. "Can you confirm it?" Prince Yan asked with a trace of coldness in his eyes. "The possibility is very high. That's why I asked to stay." Ning Chen nodded. His expression was also very ugly. During that assassination, if Qing Ning had not risked her life to protect them, he and Zhang Sun would not have been able to escape. Thinking about it now, he still shuddered. "Don't hurt them by mistake, and don't let them go by mistake," Prince Yan said calmly. "Understood," Ning Chen replied. Outside the tent, the white-bearded elder looked at the black-clothed man beside him and said in a heavy tone, "Ming Cheng, can you tell where they came from?" "I can't, but the young man in the wheelchair is very powerful. I am not his opponent. As for the man in green, I can't feel the aura of a warrior. He should be just an ordinary person," Ming Cheng expressed his opinion. "Could they be from Xia?" the white-bearded elder asked. "We can only know after testing them." Ming Cheng thought for a while and said, "But they shouldn't have any bad intentions. If the young man didn't hold back just now, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to stand here." The white-bearded elder nodded and said, "It's better to be careful. Although the Pei tribe does not agree with the war between the two dynasties, Northern Meng and Xia have already started fighting. We can't be the ones who invite the wolf into the house." "Yes," Ming Cheng nodded and replied. Inside and outside the tent, everyone had their own schemes. However, the person who should be paid the most attention was ignored by the four of them. Why was it so easy to forget a woman's happiness? Pei Yan fell in love with the man in green at first sight. Especially the tranquil and calm aura on him, it made her feel an unprecedented peace. "Grandpa," Pei Yan walked over and respectfully greeted the white-bearded elder in front of the tent. "Yan, have you taken your medicine?" the white-bearded elder asked with concern. His granddaughter had been suffering from heartache since she was young. She had to take medicine every day to ensure that it would not relapse. "I've taken it," Pei Yan replied with a gentle smile on her face. "Where's third brother?" Pei Yan looked around and found that Ming Cheng was nowhere to be seen. She could not help but ask. "In the tent." The white-bearded elder turned his head and glanced at her. In the tent, Ming Cheng, who just walked in, looked at the young man in the wheelchair and the man in green who was drinking tea quietly beside the table. He felt strange. No matter how he looked at it, the man in green who did not have any chi of a cultivator was the one in charge. As for the young man, he seemed more like a junior. He was not a cultivator, but he could still maintain the appearance of a man in his 20s. No matter how he looked at it, it was a little strange. "May I know how I should address you?" Ming Cheng lowered his attitude and asked politely. "Ning Fan, this is an elder in my family. He doesn't like to talk to others. So, I won't introduce him," Ning Chen replied with a bright smile. "I'm Pei Ming Cheng. Thank you for showing mercy, Brother Ning." Ming Cheng bowed respectfully and thanked him. Brother Pei, you're too courteous. We were also in the wrong earlier. I hope Brother Pei won't blame us for being rude. Ning Chen sighed softly and said. It's not appropriate for me to ask about my sister's matter. I can only wait for Yen Er to make the decision herself. It's not that the Pei family is deliberately making things difficult for her. It's just that the matter of choosing a groom is an extremely serious matter in our tribe. Brother Ning's attitude just now really made my sister feel a little embarrassed. Ming Cheng explained the seriousness of the matter. It was the custom of the Pei family for the past thousands of years. The people of the grassland were not so cunning. The men would snatch the embroidered ball and the women would only wear the red ribbon if they were willing. Both parties were willing. Today's situation had never happened before. Yen Er was the granddaughter of the patriarch and also the pearl of the entire tribe. Her reputation was extremely important. Today's matter was indeed the fault of the two men in front of him. Hearing this, Ning Chen glanced at Prince Yen, who was still calmly drinking his tea. He suddenly felt a headache coming on. Senior, can you say something? Brother Pei, we really didn't consider this matter properly. We're new here and aren't familiar with the customs. I hope Brother Pei can give us a solution. While speaking, Ning Chen poured himself a cup of tea. Why should he be thirsty when his senior was drinking tea? Ming Chen thought for a moment and said, let your senior marry Yen Er. Pft, cough cough. Hearing this, Ning Chen spat out his tea and coughed non-stop. His face turned red from choking. This matter was very unreliable. He should think of a way to get some information and then send a message. Cough cough, Brother Pei, although the seniors in my family haven't gotten married yet, marriage is still a big matter for two people. Your Miss Yen Er and my senior both need to think about it carefully. There's no rush. Ning Chen's head hurt. What should he do? If it was a matter between men, he could just send a message if he couldn't think of a solution. But now that it involved a pure and innocent girl, his intelligence was not enough. Should he write a letter to Zhang Sun and ask? This thought suddenly flashed through Ning Chen's mind. Immediately, he shivered and immediately dismissed this suicidal thought. Chapter 84. Ning Chen admitted that he was a very dangerous person. He would never provoke people he couldn't afford to offend. For example, Zhang Sun and Zhang Sun. Everything in the world had its weakness. Even if he reached the Xiantian realm, he still wouldn't dare to be arrogant in front of Zhang Sun. Moreover, he was still far away from the Xiantian realm. After recovering his cultivation, his confidence had increased a lot, but it also depended on who he was facing. He couldn't beat Zhang Sun, and he couldn't afford to offend him. In the end, he could only bully outsiders with his 7th grade cultivation. Ming Chen could tell that Ning Chen was stalling, but he didn't point it out. He also needed time to test their background. Yen Er's marriage wasn't a small matter. How could it be decided just like that? Brother Ning, may I know why you came to the Pei clan? If there's anything you need help with, just tell me, Ming Chen asked casually as if nothing had happened. We're just passing by. It's nothing, Ning Chen replied with a smile. Where are you going, Brother Ning? Ming Chen continued to ask. The capital, Ning Chen said honestly, I've long heard that the capital of Northern Meng is a miracle in the desert. I've always admired it, but I've never had the chance to see it. This time, I came with the elders of my family to see it. Brother Ning, are you not from Northern Meng? Ming Chen asked in surprise. Ning Chen smiled and shook his head, saying, Ni country is a small country. It's not worthy of Brother Pei's attention. Ming Chen frowned, but he didn't ask any more. He had never heard of Ni country, but in this world, there were countless big and small countries. If he continued to ask, it would be rude. Brother Ning, have a good rest. I won't disturb you. I'll take my leave first, Ming Chen cupped his fists and said politely. Ning Chen also cupped his fists and said sincerely with a smile, Brother Pei's saber technique is good. If there's time, I must ask for your advice again. Any time. Ming Qing replied. After Ming Qing left, Yan Imperial Prince drank the tea in his cup and said calmly, "You're quite patient." Ning Chen chuckled and said, "I've just arrived here. How can I ask for information so quickly? It's better to leave an honest impression." However, this Pei Ming Cheng was a little impatient. He asked too many things he shouldn't have asked. "Not everyone can be as scheming as you," Prince Yan said calmly. Ning Chen was speechless. He was forced to do this. He also wanted to be pure, but how could he be pure? The world was so chaotic, and people's hearts were so unpredictable. If he didn't learn to hide a knife behind a smile, others would stab him in the back first. "Is there really such a place as Ni country?" Prince Yen asked casually. "Who knows? The world is so big and there are so many countries. Who knows?" Ning Chen replied indifferently. "Ha!" Prince Yen chuckled. Indeed, he was full of nonsense. He wondered how Wuyo had brought this brat back to the Weiyang Palace. "Senior, how should we deal with that lady?" Ning Chen was put in a difficult position. This was the most important thing right now, and everything else was still manageable. "It's up to you. You're the one who wants to watch the show, and you're the one who wants to stay. Naturally, you'll be the one to resolve this matter." It was rare for Prince Yen to say more and push all the responsibility to the younger generation. Hearing this, Ning Chen was furious. This matter couldn't be settled like this. Who was the one who took the embroidered ball? Who was the red ribbon for? So what if they were Xiantian? So what if they were Legend? Could Xiantian and Legend casually make things difficult for the younger generation? "Senior, you're shirking responsibility," Ning Chen argued, unwilling to take the blame just like that. "So what if I am?" Prince Yen replied calmly. Ning Chen was dumbfounded. This was too arrogant. How could he be like this? He thought of a saying from his previous life. Only a strong country could have diplomacy. Senior had demonstrated this point incisively and vividly. So what if he was? Such a domineering and arrogant statement. What could he do? He didn't dare to do anything. "Senior, you win." Ning Chen clenched his teeth and complimented him. "Ha!" Prince Yen didn't care. He continued to drink the tea in his cup calmly. The tent quieted down. Ning Chen calmed down and thought about how to solve the problem in front of him. First, there was the trouble of Senior, and second, there was the assassination of Zhang Sun. He wasn't good at Senior's matter, but Zhang Sun's matter shouldn't be difficult to investigate. There weren't many people in the entire northern Meng imperial court who used this kind of scimitar. They might even be from the same faction. He only needed to know some clues and he could follow them until he found the final target. He had Prince Yen, a nuclear weapon, by his side. No matter how strong the faction was, they could be chopped up like vegetables. Just as the two of them were thinking, a beautiful woman opened the tent flap and walked in. Ning Chen felt a headache coming. He looked at the woman and then at Prince Yen. In the end, he decided not to be a third wheel and leave enough space for the two of them to talk. "You guys talk. I'm a little hungry. I'm going to eat something." Before he finished speaking, Ning Chen hurriedly turned his wheelchair and slipped out of the tent. At this moment, he had the urge to stand up and run. "Bring some back for me too," Prince Yen said calmly. Ning Chen staggered and almost fell down. He quickly stabilized himself and gritted his teeth. "Definitely." The tent flap fell. Ning Chen wiped his cold sweat and looked at the blue sky and white clouds outside. He was in a good mood. In his eyes, other than that uncute Fan Lingyue, the rest of the people in the northern Meng imperial court were still very cute. The herdsmen were already busy with their livelihood at the beginning of the year. After winter and spring came, there were already patches of green on the grassland. Although it was still not enough to herd horses and sheep, it was not as desolate as before. Night was coming. The people in the tribe were preparing dinner. They were killing sheep and starting fires. People came and went in front of every tent. It was very lively. Ning Chen was so envious that his heart itched. He turned his wheelchair and went over, wanting to get familiar with them. However, he was mercilessly given a cold shoulder by the men of the grassland. They knew this young man. He had just offended the most beautiful pearl in their tribe. He was a very bad person. No one in the world knew how thick-skinned Ning Chen was. Even if others ignored him, he would still approach them with a smile on his face. He would help with fetching water and helping with the fire. In short, no matter how strong the enemy was, he wanted to be as pleasant as the spring breeze. The maidens and ants of the grassland quickly accepted this diligent, laughing, and kind-hearted young man. The men of the grassland forced their wives and mothers to gradually change their attitudes. Little brother Ning, you don't know. At that time, that wild wolf was less than a zhang away from me. Its eyes were wide open like lanterns, but I was not afraid. I threw myself at it and killed it with a few punches and kicks. In front of the bonfire, a man was bragging. Big brother Ahu, you're so awesome. Next to him, Ning Chen's face revealed a look of worship as he complimented. Little brother Ning, don't listen to his nonsense. At that time, he was so scared that he couldn't even walk. It was the tribe's divine archer, Shui, who shot an arrow through the wild wolf's eye and saved him. At this time, Ahu's wife came over to deliver the mutton and ruthlessly undermined him. Ha! Ahu scratched his head in embarrassment and argued with a lack of confidence. In the end, it was me who killed it. It would have died even if you didn't kill it. Ahu's wife replied. Big brother Ahu is still very awesome. The first time I met a wild wolf, I was so scared that I almost peed in my pants. Ning Chen promptly saved the situation. Oh? Little brother Ning has also met a wild wolf? Sure enough, whose attention was attracted and he asked curiously. Yes. At that time, little brother's legs weren't crippled and I hadn't practiced martial arts. After I saw a wild wolf, I was so scared that my face turned white. Even after the wild wolf died, I was still vomiting. Ning Chen said with a bashful face. Who laughed heartily. He felt that this little brother was very much to his liking. He was honest, simple and honest, and he was also very down-to-earth. Ahu's wife also smiled with good intentions. The people of the prairie were all afraid of meeting a wild wolf. One or two was still okay, but a pack was a bit scary. Being scared by a wild wolf wasn't a shameful thing. Big brother Ahu, is there anyone in the tribe who can do carpentry? Little brother's wheelchair is a bit broken. I need to find someone to fix it. While speaking, Ning Chen's face flashed with a touch of embarrassment as he asked in a low voice. Hearing this, Hu and Ahu's wife both laughed. Just find your big brother Ahu. He's the person who's the best at carpentry in the tribe. Ahu's wife laughed. Ning Chen was startled. He turned his gaze towards Ahu and saw Ahu proudly nodding his head. He was surprised in his heart. He didn't expect that this simple and honest man actually had some skill. You can't judge a book by its cover. Who said Zhang Fei didn't know how to embroider? This big and rough man could actually do fine carpentry. Big brother Ahu, then I'll leave it to you. Ning Chen politely saluted and said. Little brother Ning is too polite. Ahu laughed and casually said. While the two people were chatting, the bonfire crackled and popped. The aroma of mutton also began to gradually spread. Ning Chen's gaze also moved to the mutton on the bonfire. His mouth was drooling. Mutton with his hands. He wanted to taste it in his previous life, but unfortunately, he never had the chance. Come, little brother Ning. I'll give you a leg of mutton. Ahu's wife was a relatively careful person. She saw Ning Chen's greedy look at a glance and handed over the leg of mutton that was roasted first. Then I won't be polite. Ning Chen's face was smiling like a blooming flower. He took the leg of mutton and ate it happily without fearing that it was hot. Your elder won't come out to eat? Ah Hu asked strangely. He's not hungry. Ning Chen was busy eating the meat. He didn't have time to explain. He directly solved the problem with 3 words and then continued to wolf down the meat. Oh. Ah Hu didn't doubt him. He used a knife to cut a piece of roasted meat and handed it to his wife. He also began to eat in big mouthfuls. The 3 of them sat around the bonfire. Ah Hu's wife, Ah Hu, and Ning Chen slowly ate the meat in big mouthfuls. After a while, only the bones of the half of the goat were left. Ah Hu's wife ate a little, Hu ate a leg, and Ning Chen ate the rest. After eating, Ning Chen thanked the enthusiastic Ah Hu and his wife and prepared to return to the tent. As he walked, he felt that he had forgotten something. He thought for a while but couldn't remember it. Since he couldn't remember it, it shouldn't be important. Who cares? Chapter 85. Early in the morning, the sun was shining brightly. In the open space in front of the tribe, the sound of swords clashing could be heard, attracting many people to come and watch. In the field, the people fighting were Ning Chen and Ming Cheng. The ink sword danced in the sunlight, blocking every angle of the scimitar. Ning Chen suppressed his cultivation to the same 6th grade as Ming Cheng, but he still had an overwhelming advantage. Prince Yen was also watching from the side. He was not surprised by this result. Although Ning Chen had not been practicing martial arts for a long time, the number of battles he had fought was not less than anyone else. Most of his opponents were people with higher cultivation than him. In terms of battle experience, he was already very rich. In a martial arts competition, there was nothing more than cultivation, foundation, and moves. Other than that, experience was the most decisive factor. Caw! In the middle of the battle, something unexpected happened. The moment the sword and the blade clashed again, there was a crisp sound. In the next moment, the wheelchair under Ning Chen shattered and flew in all directions. Ning Chen frowned at this sudden situation. His ink sword was on the ground, and he turned his right hand, flying backwards. In the next moment, the scimitar came towards him. It was as cold as the moon and as fast as lightning. Facing the unavoidable blade light, Ning Chen's left hand clenched his fingers. With a clang, he caught the scimitar. Taking advantage of the momentum, he let go of the scimitar and pointed his sword finger at Ming Cheng's shoulder. Ning Chen's finger's strength penetrated his body. After succeeding in one move, he did not continue to attack. His right hand patted the hilt of his ink sword, and he immediately retreated from the battle. At the same time, Prince Yen waved his hand, and a chair flew out of the tent, landing right where Ning Chen had landed. This move was done so casually that no one noticed it. No one would think that this young man without any martial arts aura was actually one of the most terrifying Xiantian masters in the world. In the field, the scimitar in Ming Cheng's hand had already fallen to the ground. The numbness in his shoulder did not dissipate for a long time, and he could not even lift it up. Brother Ning's swordsmanship is brilliant. I am ashamed of my inferiority. Ming Cheng was not a petty person. A loss was a loss. His left hand gradually raised the scimitar, and he admitted defeat seriously. Brother Pei, you're too courteous. Ning Chen sat down in his chair. With a wave of his hand, the ink sword and scabbard flew back to him. With a clang, the ink sword returned to its scabbard and stabbed into the ground. I've seen Brother Pei's saber technique. Although it's as swift and fierce as lightning, it's mostly just for show. It doesn't seem like an orthodox martial art. Ning Chen frowned and pretended to feel that it was a pity. That's impossible. The Qing clan's saber techniques are the most orthodox martial arts of Beimeng. How can it be just for show? As expected, Ming Chen fell for the trick and immediately denied it. Sigh, at this moment, Ning Chen and Prince Yen sighed in their hearts. Too inexperienced. I lost because my skills were not good enough. Brother Ning, please don't slander the Qing family's saber technique. Ming Chen did not know that there was a trap and continued to speak with a solemn expression. Brother Pei, please don't blame me. I was rude. Ning Chen bowed and apologized. His attitude couldn't be more proper. Seeing Ning Chen's sincere tone of apology, Ming Cheng's expression became a little better. He no longer cared about the former's rude words. After the fight and the show, the crowd applauded cooperatively and then dispersed. Everyone went back to their own homes and did their own things. "Brother Ahu, don't forget my wheelchair." Ning Chen couldn't move. He could only sit on the chair and shout at Ahu, who was far away. "I know." Ahu also replied in a loud voice. For the whole morning, Ning Chen sat in the open space outside in a daze. He couldn't go anywhere. The beautiful grassland scenery made him want to vomit. "Do you want to get up and take a walk?" Prince Yen walked over and asked lightly. "No, you do your thing." Ning Chen refused without hesitation. "Then you continue." Prince Yen turned and walked towards the tent. "Senior, what did you say to that girl yesterday?" Ning Chen couldn't suppress the fire of gossip in his heart. He couldn't help but shout at the former's back. When he went back to the tent last night, he happened to see Pei Yen walk out with red eyes. This made him very curious. He thought about it until midnight and almost couldn't sleep. "I didn't say a word." Prince Yen replied without turning his head. Ning Chen was stunned. Then, he couldn't help but say, "Damn." No wonder the girl almost cried. He originally wanted to leave some space for the two of them. Why didn't the senior reject him tactfully? If not, he could have rejected him directly. Yesterday, he found out from Ahu that this Pei Yan's identity was not ordinary. Her grandfather was the leader of the Pei tribe, which was the overall boss of this area. He was very powerful. He had a good impression of this girl. She was a little weak and seemed a little sentimental. However, she was still a kind and good girl. Such a gentle girl was more like a lady from a noble family in the Central Plains than a girl from the grassland. He also heard that this Pei Yen was proficient in zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. She liked the culture of Great Xia very much. He also heard that this Pei Yen had a heartache disease. She was like the original version of Lin Dayu. He also heard that this Pei Yan's mother died right after giving birth to Pei Yen because of heartache. He also heard that this Pei Yen might not live past 25 years old. Moreover, more than one doctor said so. The more Ning Chen thought about it, the more indignant he felt. Yesterday afternoon, he had painstakingly collected information outside. He had even sacrificed his face and wanted to find out Pei Yan's birth characters. However, this senior of his just stayed in the tent and drank tea for half a day. At this moment, a little girl's voice sounded in the grassland. Her tone was anxious, and it immediately attracted the attention of many people. "Miss has fainted." As soon as she finished speaking, the white-bearded elder in the tent not far away immediately walked out with a gloomy expression. He quickly walked towards Pei Yan's tent. Following behind him were the doctors from Ming City, the grassland, and a large group of people. Ning Chen thought hard. A heartache disease should be a heart disease in his world. Furthermore, this girl was born with it. The possibility of her being cured was really negligible. The caltrip crystal flower had a miraculous effect on heart meridian injuries. Unfortunately, he didn't have it. As for whether he would take out the caltrip crystal flower if he had it, only the heavens knew. There were no assumptions in this world. Therefore, this girl was probably incurable. Although it was cruel, this was the reality. Inside Pei Yan's tent, the doctor was checking her pulse. His expression became more and more serious, indicating that the situation was not optimistic. "How is Yen Er?" the white-bearded elder asked anxiously. "Patriarch, I've already tried my best." The doctor sighed softly and continued. Mrs. Body was already extremely weak. Before this, I suggested to chase away the bad luck for her because I wanted to see if a miracle would happen. Now, it's no longer necessary. How could it be? The white-bearded elder staggered and his face turned pale. Yen Er hasn't gotten married yet. How can she just leave like this? Chase away the bad luck. Yes, chase away the bad luck. At this moment, this was the only thought in the white-bearded elder's mind. He could not care less about other things. He immediately calmed himself down and ordered. Men. Yes. A few men walked into the tent. Go and bring Mrs. Wedding Dress here. Tonight, Miss will get married. Also, take care of those two people. Yes. The men accepted the order and left. At the side, Ming Cheng's face showed a hint of worry. Patriarch, isn't it a little inappropriate to do this? That young man called Ning Fan is very strong. It's better not to offend him. We can't care so much. Yen Heir's matter is the most important. The white-bearded elder said in a deep voice. Ning Chen, who was outside the tent, had no idea about what was happening inside. At this moment, he was still waiting for his wheelchair to be ready. The sun rose from the east, to the south and then to the west. Ning Chen was sitting there. Just as he was about to go crazy from boredom, he suddenly realized that the atmosphere in the tribe had gradually become a little unusual. A few young ladies from the grassland were walking around with all kinds of things in their hands. There were even red candles and red paper that were only used during festivals and weddings. Ning Chen did not take it seriously at first. Later, he felt that something was wrong. A thought flashed through his mind and he could not help but open his mouth wide. Forced marriage? It can't be, right? The matter had become big. Ning Chen had a headache. The Yen Prince of Great Xia was actually forced to get married. Who would believe this? Little brother Ning, your wheelchair is ready. Just as Ning Chen was having a headache, he suddenly heard Ahu's loud voice coming from not far away. He could not help but be overjoyed. Now he could quickly run away. However, when he saw the wheelchair, he almost cried. He was wrong. He should not have believed that Zhang Fei could embroider. How was this a wheelchair? This was clearly a chair with wheels. Big brother Ahu, thank you. Ning Chen gritted his teeth and thanked him. Little brother Ning is too polite. Ahu was a careless person. He very happily accepted Ning Chen's thanks. Ning Chen sat on it. He felt that it would not fall apart in a short period of time. Only then did he feel slightly relieved. He would make do with it. He would buy another one in the royal city of the northern Meng imperial court. Big brother Ahu, what are they doing? Ning Chen pointed at the young ladies from the grassland who were busying themselves and asked in a low voice. Ahu looked around and immediately lowered his head. He said in a low voice, I'll tell you. Don't tell anyone that I told you. Of course. Ning Chen nodded his head like a chick pecking at rice. I heard from my wife that Miss Pei Yen is seriously ill. The clan leader is going to drive away the bad luck for Miss tonight, who said in a low voice. Fuck, is that true? Don't fool me. Ning Chen pretended to be surprised. How can it be fake? It's absolutely true. Ahu patted his chest and almost swore. Big brother Ahu, you can go back first. I definitely won't say that you told me. Ning Chen said gratefully. Ahu left in satisfaction. Ning Chen immediately turned his wheelchair and came to Prince Yan's tent. The first thing he said when he came in was, Senior, who said that you are going to be forced to marry? Should we run? In the tent, Prince Yan glanced at Ning Chen indifferently and said, This is the solution you have been thinking about for the whole day? Ning Chen was a little ashamed. But after thinking about it, he felt that it was not right. Why should he be ashamed? He was not the one who caused this. Hurry up, surround the tent. Don't let them run away. At this time, the unique rough voice of a man from the grassland sounded from outside. Immediately, the sound of hurried footsteps could be heard. There were at least 100 people. All right, it's too late to run now. Ning Chen sighed helplessly. He was very unhappy. Why did he have to fight all day long? Chapter 86. The curtain of the tent was lifted, and a few burly men walked in. They looked murderous and unfriendly. The men of the grassland had seen blood before. Once they were serious, they would exude an oppressive aura that was different from ordinary people. However, this was only for ordinary people. The two people in the tent could not be said to be murderous, but they were the kind of extraordinary people who would not even blink when killing. Ning Chen turned the wheelchair around and stabbed the black sword into the ground. He did not hide his displeasure. You want to fight? Who's afraid of who? The white-bearded old man walked in, Ming Qing walked in, and even the doctor came in. Seeing the calm young man in green, they frowned. Take him away, the white-bearded old man shouted. Yes. The 7 burly men went around the wheelchair and directly grabbed the young man in green. Ning Chen's displeasure grew. Did they think he was invisible? He patted the black sword with his right hand, and a wave of true essence spread out. The burly men were forced to take a few steps back. Let's talk nicely. Ning Chen was guilty, and he did not want to make things worse. He suppressed his temper and said, Ming Cheng, you hold him back, the white-bearded old man shouted. Yes. Ming Cheng helplessly pulled out the scimitar at his waist and took 2 steps forward. He said to Ning Chen, Brother Ning, sorry for the offense. Ning Chen's expression gradually turned cold. He gave him face, but he did not want it. Clang, the black sword was unsheathed. Frost condensed on the sword, and snowflakes surged. The temperature in the tent dropped. The tense atmosphere spread, and a fight was about to break out. At this moment, Yan Qin Prince, who had been silent all this time, spoke. Okay, put your sword away. Yan Qin Prince walked out of the tent and said lightly, Go and see what's going on. Okay. Ning Chen narrowed his eyes, put his sword back into the scabbard, and followed him out. When the two of them walked out, Ming Qing broke out in a cold sweat. They had underestimated the young man in the wheelchair. Even if there were 10 more of them, they would not be able to stop him, let alone him. Patriarch, we can't use force. Ming Qing advised again. The white-bearded old man snorted coldly, then turned and walked out of the tent. In Pei Yan's tent, Ning Chen and Yan Qin Prince looked at the beautiful girl lying on the bed and got the truth from the doctor. Senior, is there any way to save him? Ning Chen asked via voice transmission. Caltrip flower, Prince Yan said calmly. So there's no hope? Ning Chen asked in a low voice. With your blood and my help, I can extend her lifespan by 3 years. Like I said before, you can do whatever you want with her, Yan Wang said calmly. We'll do our best. Ning Chen nodded and made a prompt decision. After he finished speaking, Ning Chen turned around and looked at the white-bearded old man who had just entered. He said, We can extend Miss Pei Yan's lifespan by 3 years. As a trade, all the enmity from before will be forgotten. The white-bearded old man was stunned, and so was everyone else. Ning Chen didn't urge him, but waited patiently and coldly. The worry of the people present was in stark contrast to the calmness of the two. Zhang Xuan's words that day were vividly reflected at this moment. Ning Chen was the most heartless person in the world. If it weren't for the fact that they were the ones in the wrong, who lived and who died would have nothing to do with him. She wasn't a man. Are you confident? The white-bearded old man asked with a trace of distrust in his eyes. It's up to you to believe it or not, Ning Chen said indifferently. The white-bearded old man's expression changed again and again. A moment later, he clenched his teeth and said, Fine, I agree. You can all leave. Yan Wang stepped forward and arrived in front of the bed. The white-bearded old man and everyone else hesitated, but they still couldn't decide. It's not too late to back out now. Ning Chen also turned his wheelchair and arrived in front of the bed. Get out. The white-bearded old man finally made up his mind. He drove everyone out of the tent and then followed them out. Poor parents. Ning Chen sighed softly. Then, he used his sword finger to cut his arm. Drops of blood flowed down his arm and dripped onto Pei Yan's chest. He had the heaven-reversing pill in his body, and he had also soaked in Northern Meng's heavenly lake. It could be said that he was a living primer. At the same time, Yan Wang turned his palm and condensed qi. Xiantian power wrapped around the dripping blood and quickly entered Pei Yan's heart meridian. In an instant, the medicinal power spread and began to nourish Pei Yan's extremely weak heart. After about 10 breaths, Yan Wang stopped. Ning Chen wiped his hand and a silver light flashed, stopping the blood on his arm. Then, he looked at Pei Yan on the bed and waited for her to wake up. After half an hour, Pei Yan woke up. She looked at the young man in green in front of her and said weakly, "Can you tell me your true identity?" "Great Xia, Yan Wang said lightly. Pei Yan was stunned. Then, she closed her eyes weakly. A drop of tear fell silently. "Thank you." Ning Chen and Yan Wang went out. The white-bearded old man immediately entered the tent. When he saw Pei Yan waking up on the bed, he couldn't help but cry with joy. "Let them go." The old man's voice came from the tent. Ming Cheng and the others heard it and automatically made a path for the two of them to leave. "Let's go." Yan Wang walked in front, his green robe fluttering in the wind. "Okay." Ning Chen responded and followed him. The two of them left unhurriedly without any reluctance. No matter how beautiful the grassland was, they were just passers-by. It was enough that they had seen it. The mountains have no foundation, the waters have no foundation, the grass is desolate, the clouds are faint, the willows are green, the cuckoo is unbearable to hear. On the grassland, there was a voice saying goodbye. Ning Chen turned around and saw a woman in a red wedding dress sitting in front of the tent. She was holding a pipa in her arms. Her face was pale and her red lips were red like blood. She was like a rose blooming in the cold wind. She was so beautiful that people didn't dare to look at her directly. What a pity. Ning Chen sighed softly but didn't say anything. Then, he turned around and continued walking forward. Yan Wang's expression was still as calm as ever. There was no fluctuation in his expression. He walked step by step without any hesitation. The grassland was very big. The two of them walked all the way north without stopping until they reached their destination, the capital of Northern Meng. This was a city in the desert. From afar, it looked like a holy city floating on a yellow sea. It was very shocking. After the two of them entered the capital, they found that the lives of the people here were very different from the grassland outside. They were somewhat similar to the people of the Central Plains. They did all kinds of small businesses. They worked from dawn to dusk. Ning Chen glanced at the majestic palace building in the distance and sneered. It was said that after the death of the Northern Meng Emperor, the palace was in chaos and several princes fought for the throne. It was also at this time that Fan Lingyue appeared out of nowhere and swept away all resistance. He helped the previous emperor's infant son to the throne and ended the internal strife in the Northern Meng Empire. This meant that the emperor of Northern Meng was only 7 years old this year. Northern Meng's sand sword is about to appear. I want to go take a look. Let's part here. Yan Wang's eyes flashed. Hearing this, Ning Chen was startled. Then, he nodded. Since Senior didn't let him go, it meant that he wasn't strong enough. It might be dangerous if he went. How do I contact you? Ning Chen asked. No need. I will look for you. Before he finished speaking, Yan Wang's figure had already disappeared. He was rushing towards the north. Ning Chen opened his mouth and finally shook his head helplessly. He was hoping that Yan Wang could do this with him. Now, it seemed that he had to rely on himself. It was a little difficult, but he couldn't keep waiting. The situation of Great Xia was already very dangerous. Zhang Sun was still having a headache. He had to do something. When he had just entered the capital, he had already inquired about the current situation of the war between the two dynasties. The Great Xia's Heaven's Gate had actually been broken through by Fan Lingyue, and Northern Meng's army of 300,000 marched straight in, even blocking the 3 martial marquises of the Great Xia outside the pass. This was the worst news. Since the war between the two dynasties, Great Xia's losses had reached a terrifying number. However, Northern Meng's army was almost unharmed. Beizhong Plains and Yangue City's 200,000 soldiers, Zhuosheng's 350,000 soldiers, and the 300,000 soldiers in the hands of the three marquises were no longer a threat. Great Xia's 850,000 soldiers couldn't stop Northern Meng's 300,000 soldiers. The biggest difference was that Northern Meng had Fan Lingyue, but Great Xia didn't. This was a woman who could single-handedly create an era. She was already invincible. Ning Chen didn't want Fan Lingyue to know that he was still alive because he didn't want to confront her directly. He was also full of fear for such a woman. Ever since he came to this world, he had suffered a few big losses and even suffered serious injuries. Fan Lingyue was behind all of them. She wanted to kill him, and he wanted to kill her. It was so simple that he could ignore everything. The Qing clan was a pawn that could be used. Based on the scimitar in Ming Cheng's hand, he could basically conclude that the group that assassinated Zhang Sun back then was from the Qing clan. Then, he could also conclude that the Qing clan was also a hidden pawn of Fan Lingyue. He wanted to go in and see what kind of place the Qing clan was. The Qing clan was in Northern Meng's capital. In this imperial land where there were as many aristocratic families as there were dogs and nobles everywhere, it wasn't very eye-catching. However, the Qing clan was different from other aristocratic families and nobles. The Qing clan wasn't really a clan with a single surname. There were very few direct descendants of the Qing clan, and they weren't allowed to marry outside, causing the number of descendants to dwindle. In a situation where they had no choice, the Qing clan set a rule that those who made great contributions to the Qing clan could be bestowed with the surname Qing. Regarding the traditions and rules of the Qing clan, Ning Chen only had one word to say. Pooh! Incestuous marriage, I won't kill you all. However, this also gave him a lot of convenience. For the continuation of the bloodline, the Qing clan didn't reject any true experts. In the future, as long as they made enough contributions, they could be bestowed with the surname. He didn't have the slightest interest in this surname. Moreover, he went in to stab a knife. The Qing clan was very big, so big that it was shocking. Ning Chen entered the Qing clan in a very high-profile and arrogant manner. He directly fought his way in. His cultivation of 7th grade immediately attracted the attention of the higher-ups of the Qing clan. A 7th grade martial artist under the age of 20 was really rare. This young master is here to be a guest elder. Call someone who can talk. Ning Chen held a broken iron sword in his hand and stabbed it into the ground. He spoke arrogantly to a group of people who had fallen in front of him. Chapter 87. Ning Chen did not use the ink sword because he did not want people to recognize him. As for his appearance, with the beard and scars, who would recognize him? He was not Panin, who was unforgettable. Moreover, everyone in the world knew that he was already dead. If there were still people who linked him to Panin, he would really have nothing to say. Soon, the butler of the Qing family walked out. When he saw Ning Chen with a ferocious face and an unshaven beard, he could not help but frown. Such an ugly person. May I ask your name? The butler asked politely. Jade-faced gentleman, by Yutong, Ning Chen raised his head and said arrogantly. The wriggling scar on his face made him look somewhat scary and disgusting. Brother Bai, why have you come to the Qing mansion? The butler held back his disgust and continued to ask. Didn't I say it? I am here to be an honored guest. Ning Chen did not see his face and continued to do whatever he wanted. He said arrogantly with his nose up in the air. After some thought, Ning Chen added, I am also here to marry that little girl, Qing Wushuang. He knew that the Qing family had a missy named Qing Wushuang. At that time, he was puzzled about how there were so many thick-skinned people in the world. The Qing family of Wushuang City had Qing Wushuang, and the Qing family of Bei Meng had Qing Wushuang. However, as soon as Ning Chen finished speaking, a clear and cold voice resounded from within the estate, Men, throw him out. While the voice was speaking, a girl with a cold expression walked out. When she saw the ugly man in the yard, her beautiful eyes revealed a strong sense of disgust. "You are Qin Wushuang?" Ning Chen said with surprise. Only, this surprised expression appeared too ferocious when paired with the scar on his face. "Missy!" Before the butler of the Qin family could persuade her, 9 men dressed in black had already walked out and surrounded Ning Chen. "Come, I have been itching for a fight recently. Little girl, I will teach you a lesson after I take care of these bastards." Ning Chen pulled out the broken iron sword from the ground, turned his wheelchair and walked 2 steps forward. Fortunately, he had bought a sturdy wheelchair as soon as he had entered the city. Or else, he would not be able to fight today with that thing made by Hu. The sword was a broken sword. As soon as Ning Chen injected a strand of true qi into it, he felt that the sword showed signs of cracking. He hurriedly withdrew his true qi and wrapped it around the sword. Ning Chen's arrogance infuriated everyone present. The 9 men in black attacked with machetes in their hands. Their machetes were ruthless, and every strike was aimed at the vital points. Qin Wushuang's cold face did not show any trace of pity. It was already unforgivable for this person to trespass into the love mansion, yet he still dared to speak rudely. He must be tired of living. The 9 of them worked together and unleashed a chain of attacks. Each attack was fiercer and more dangerous than the last. Ning Chen laughed out loud and swung his sword to block the attacks of the 3 people in front of him. His expression was incomparably savage as he said, "Good timing." As soon as he finished speaking, Ning Chen's rank 7 aura was fully unleashed. His sword momentum was unreasonably large. The 9 of them were soon no match for him. One by one, they were sent flying, covered in blood. When she saw this, Qin Wushuang gave a cold sneer. Moving her lotus steps, she instantly arrived before Ning Chen and pressed her palm towards the latter's chest. At this critical moment, Ning Chen sent out his finger. The finger and palm collided with each other. With a bang, a violent wind emerged around the 2 of them. It was a battle of foundation and strength. The corner of their mouths were dyed red. Instantly, the frightening power shattered the stone floor beneath them and sent gravel flying everywhere. The evenly matched battle had shocked both of them. Ning Chen's eyes became cold. Indeed, the love mansion was full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. However, even if it was a dragon's lair or a tiger's den, he would still charge in. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang was also shocked. Yet, she did not dare to withdraw her power. Ning Chen gave a cold sneer and unleashed his power without giving in. The brilliant battle had attracted the attention of a few important figures in the love mansion. Immediately, a powerful palm appeared and separated the 2 of them. When the dust and sand had dispersed, a middle-aged man appeared. He looked at Ning Chen and said calmly, "You want to marry Wushuang?" "I wanted to before, but now I don't want to anymore." "In the future, it'll depend on my mood," said Ning Chen arrogantly. The middle-aged man frowned. "It doesn't matter if you want to or not. If you want to enter the love mansion, you must first pass the love mansion's test and abide by the love mansion's rules." "What test? What rules?" asked Ning Chen suspiciously. "The test is very simple. Defeat a Azurobe disciple. As for the rules, we'll talk about them after you pass the test," explained the middle-aged man. He then turned and walked towards the back of the mansion. "That's exactly what I was looking for." Ning Chen raised his broken iron sword and followed. After the 2 of them left, Qin Wushuang suddenly staggered and vomited a mouthful of blood. She had actually lost the previous battle by half a point. "Miss," the steward immediately went forward with a concerned expression. "It's nothing." Qin Wushuang waved her hand. But a trace of dread flashed through her eyes. Just now, she had truly underestimated this young man called by Yutang. She had already taken half a step into the 8th grade martial path for a long time, but she did not expect to suffer a hidden loss at the hands of this person. There were not many people with such a foundation in the entire northern Meng. Ning Chen followed the middle-aged man into the back of the love mansion. He immediately saw 4 blue-robed old men. Each of their auras was more terrifying than the other. The weakest was at the 9th grade realm. "I've entered a den of thieves," muttered Ning Chen in his heart. His face subconsciously revealed a brilliant smile. However, he had forgotten that he was now an arrogant fool. He had also forgotten that his face was extremely ugly. As a result, this smile became somewhat terrifying. The 4 Love Mansion's elders could not help but feel a burst of irritation. How could there be such an ugly person in this world? Which one of you wants to go first? Or all of you together? Ning Chen pointed with his iron sword. Qing Wushuang walked in. The first thing she saw was the former's savage appearance. This time, she did not say anything. Instead, she walked to the side of one of the blue-robed old men and whispered a sentence. "First Elder, keep him." First Elder was startled. He frowned and asked, "Why?" With his cultivation, he could naturally sense that the young man in front of him was only at the 7th grade realm. Although he was already outstanding among the younger generation, it was not to the extent that the Love Mansion would do anything to win him over. "I lost just now," said Qing Wushuang honestly. Hearing this, First Elder's eyes narrowed. He tried hard to digest the shock that this sentence brought to him. He knew better than anyone else Wushuang's strength. She was already about to enter the 8th grade. Coupled with the Love Mansion's special cultivation method, she would not be at a disadvantage even if she faced a real 8th grade expert. He did not expect that she would lose to such an ugly person today. "Old 7, go test him." First Elder's thoughts turned in. He said. "First Elder, this is not in accordance with the rules." The middle-aged man who brought Ning Chen in frowned and interrupted. According to the Love Mansion's rules, if one wanted to enter the Love Mansion, one only needed to defeat a blue-robed disciple. If it was an elder, it would be too difficult. Ning Chen was also a bit stunned. He was just saying. They really planned to send a 9th grade old man? Did they still have any shame? "He only needs to be able to withstand 5 moves, First Elder said lightly. The middle-aged man frowned again, but did not continue to argue. The 4 elders were in charge of the guest elder assessment. He could not interfere too much. 7th Elder was a slightly younger old man, but no matter how young he was still an old man. Ning Chen was indignant. If he was also a 9th grade expert, he would definitely beat this guy until his mother could not recognize him. The problem was that he was only a 7th grade expert. A rank 9 old man bullying a rank 7 disabled person. How could they do such a thing? Who's afraid of who? "Come on," Ning Chen suddenly shouted, encouraging himself. "Young man, please." 7th Elder walked out and smiled. "Old man, I won't be polite." As he spoke, Ning Chen slapped his wheelchair and flew out. He stabbed his sword forward, starting the battle. "Young man, you are always too impatient." As he spoke, 7th Elder leaned to the side and reached out to grab Ning Chen's right hand that was holding the sword. However, he felt the sword turn in the air and went straight for his throat. Clang! The sword and palm collided. 7th Elder exerted force and the sword broke into pieces. The poor quality of the sword was clearly shown. 3 tails of silver were gone. Ning Chen was reluctant, but before he could feel the pain, 7th Elder waved his hand again. The broken pieces of the sword turned into rays of light and shot out mercilessly. Ning Chen, who was still in the air, did not have time to dodge. The dark yellow vortex in his energy sea spun and the thick earth energy quietly took effect. His whole body suddenly fell, avoiding the rays of light. 7th Elder frowned and reached out to grab Ning Chen again. However, Ning Chen slapped the ground hard and bent his body into a strange angle. He condensed his sword fingers and pointed at his heart meridian. Bang! The 7th Elder raised his arm to block the attack. His cultivation of the 9th rank exploded, and he shook off the fatal blow. Ning Chen flew back and returned to his wheelchair. He looked at the old man who was approaching him and smiled brightly. It's already been 5 moves. Seventh elder stopped and snorted softly. He turned and returned to his seat. This guy's moves were so strange. There were no signs to be found. It was as if every move was thought out at the last moment. Everyone present could see some clues. This young man was indeed not simple. By Yutong, from today onwards, you are a guest of the Qing family. All the rules will be taught by Wushuang herself, First Elder said, deciding the result of this battle. The Qing family needed such a strong person with potential. On the side, Qing Wushuang did not have any objections. She wanted to accept this person, so naturally she would teach him. Come with me, Qing Wushuang glanced at Ning Chen and said indifferently. Little girl, don't be so arrogant. Sooner or later, this young master will teach you a lesson, Ning Chen muttered, but intentionally or unintentionally, he didn't conceal it, allowing everyone present to hear him clearly. Qing Wushuang's eyes flashed with coldness. She sneered, if you want me to be obedient, wait until after your surname is Qing. In the backyard of the Qing family, Ning Chen was led into a small independent courtyard. Qing Wushuang threw out a sentence and did not want to see this ugly face for even half a second. Tomorrow morning, go to the main hall and wait for me. Her departing figure was so cold that Ning Chen did not care. He entered his room and closed the door. Soon after, he wearily closed his eyes. Pretending in front of others was always the most tiring thing. The Qing family's strength had shocked him. Just the Qing family alone had 4 elders above the 9th rank. Moreover, it seemed that this was not all of them. He had not expected the Qing family, which had always kept a low profile, to have such a deep foundation. Now what he wanted to do was even more troublesome. Chapter 88. What Ning Chen wanted to do, only he knew in his heart. It was a very crazy and bold idea. Fan Lingyue didn't know that he was still alive, so he wanted to give her a big surprise. However, before that, he had to find a way to stab the Qing family in the back. He couldn't take it lying down. In this world, he could be bullied, but he couldn't bully Zhang Sun. Qing Wushuang wasn't a simple woman. She could endure what ordinary people couldn't. He heard that the Qing family had a young master named Qing Wuyo, who hadn't appeared in the residence for a long time. He didn't know what kind of role the Qing family played in Fan Lingyue's hands, but if he could destroy it, it would cause some trouble for Fan Lingyue. Qing Wushuang wanted to recruit him now, so it was the best opportunity. The Qing family was deep, and it wasn't a secret that Qing Wushuang and Qing Wuyo didn't get along. This kind of thing wasn't rare in any big family. Moreover, since the appearance of the military advisor in Northern Meng royal court, the status of women rose sharply. If Qing Wushuang wanted to rise, she naturally had to step on Qing Wuyo. The current master of the Qing family was a very low-key person. Perhaps it was because of her personality, or perhaps it was because of the situation. In the era where Fan Lingyue was in power, it was destined that any big shot in Northern Meng would be overshadowed. This also caused the younger generation of the Qing family to be dazzling, completely overshadowing the previous generation. Other than Qing Wuyo and Qing Wushuang, there was also an extremely mysterious eldest daughter, Qing Wuhan. The direct descendant of the Qing family, 1 son and 2 daughters. In the past, the position of the next master would belong to Qing Wuyo, but it wasn't the case now. Not to mention Qing Wuhan, who had never shown herself, Qing Wushuang alone wouldn't sit by and watch the position of the master of the Qing family fall to someone else. A peaceful night passed. On the second day, Ning Chen arrived punctually at the main hall of the Qing family. Qing Wushuang also arrived quickly. Her face was still as cold as before, and one could even see a hint of disgust. Ning Chen expressed his understanding. Last night, when he smiled at the mirror, he also disgusted himself. There was a saying, I'm ugly, but I'm gentle. Second Mississippi Ning Chen decided to perform well, greeting her brilliantly, respectfully, and with a good attitude. Qing Wushuang frowned, not used to the former's change. If it wasn't for this face that disgusting, she would also like to have a good relationship with a young expert with potential. Well, did you rest well last night? Qing Wushuang nodded in acknowledgement, comforting herself that no matter how ugly the face was, she could get used to it. Unconsciously, her tone became slightly better. Not bad. I just lack a little girl to accompany me. Ning Chen grinned. Qing Wushuang snorted coldly in her heart, but her tone remained calm as she said, I will arrange for a maid to accompany you tonight. Hearing this, Ning Chen's heart skipped a beat, and he was a little dumbfounded. He knew that he had gone overboard with his acting. When he came to his senses, he hurriedly laughed and covered it up. How could those vulgar rouge and powder enter the eyes of a fair-skinned gentleman like me? It would be better if second miss personally accompanied me. Qing Wushuang's expression darkened again. This fellow hadn't even finished his sentence, and he had already reverted back to his disgusting self. Bai Yutong, I don't want to hear these words a second time. Alright, since you've entered the Qing family, you naturally have to abide by the Qing family's rules. Now, follow me to the law enforcement hall to do the first thing. After saying that, Qing Wushuang turned and walked out of the main hall, towards a side hall in the west. Ning Chen withdrew his smile and followed behind. After the scare just now, he was a lot more well-behaved along the way. The law enforcement hall was not far from the main hall. The person in charge was the middle-aged man from yesterday. After Qing Wushuang entered, she politely greeted him, and then officially led Ning Chen to the front. Name. In front of a stone pillar engraved with names, the middle-aged man asked. Bai Yutong, Bai as in fair-skinned gentleman, Yu as in jade tree, Tang as in dignified appearance. Ning Chen replied seriously. Qing Wushuang endured her disgust and did not go up to kick him. The middle-aged man pointed through the stone pillar and engraved the 3 words Bai Yutong under the densely packed names. Then he turned to look at the young man in front of him and said calmly, from today onwards, you are officially a guest of the Qing family. The Qing family doesn't care about your background. As long as you perform well, one day you will be bestowed with the surname Qing and enjoy all the resources of the Qing family. I hope you can cherish it. Pay. Ning Chen did not hesitate to disdain him in his heart. Lying without even blushing. He dared to guarantee that there were many people secretly investigating his identity right now. However, how could it be so simple to miss a person who appeared out of nowhere? By the time they found out, he would have long run away. Even so, Ning Chen was still very serious. He nodded seriously and said, in order to marry second miss as soon as possible, I will definitely work hard. The middle-aged man and Qing Wushuang felt helpless in their hearts. They did not know where this person's face and confidence came from. 2 days later, the Qing family will choose 3 people from the younger generation to participate in the martial feast in the imperial palace. Do you want to sign up? The middle-aged man thought for a while, and still made the announcement according to the rules. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. He secretly thought that it was finally time. This was the reason why he chose to become a guest of the Qing family. Ever since Fan Lingyue came to power, the Northern Meng Imperial Palace would hold such a martial feast every year. Every major aristocratic family had a quota, and the top 3 of the martial feast would even receive a special reward from the emperor. It was said that the young general by Fan Lingyue's side was the champion of the first martial feast. However, although the martial feast had been going on for 7 years, the rules were constantly changing. In the first 3 years, the participants had to be below 20 years old. In the middle 2 years, the age limit was relaxed to below 30 years old. In the following 2 years, the conditions were relaxed again to below 35 years old. This also caused the martial feast to become more and more unfair to the younger generation. However, Ning Chen was not surprised at all. In Fan Lingyue's eyes, there was no such thing as fairness. There was only the difference between usefulness and uselessness. 7 years ago, Fan Lingyue was still at the stage of stabilizing the court. He needed to cultivate a group of obedient and talented young people. In the middle 2 years, the court gradually stabilized. What he needed more were officials with steady minds and a desire to achieve great things. In the recent 2 years, Northern Meng had already entered a period of complete stability, gradually entering middle age. A group of people with mature minds would instead be more suitable candidates. The younger generation of the Qing family had already matured. Logically speaking, the 3 spots should not be given to outsiders. However, all signs indicated that Qing Wuhan and Qing Wuyo were not in Northern Meng's capital. This also caused at least 2 of the 3 spots of the Qing family to be empty. Therefore, when he heard the elder of the law enforcement hall ask him this question, Ning Chen could not help but smile. His smile was abnormally bright. Whether or not he could poke the Qing family's sore spot depended on this. This young master is registered. After saying this, Ning Chen turned to look at Qing Wushuang. He grinned and said, "Second miss, if I become the champion of the martial feast, will you consider marrying me?" This time, Qing Wushuang did not refuse. Unexpectedly, she agreed. "Sure. Wushuang, don't mess around." The middle-aged man shouted with an unhappy expression. "Elder Fa, Wushuang knows what to do," Qing Wushuang replied seriously. Straightforward." Ning Chen laughed loudly. He turned his wheelchair and walked out. In that instant, a coldness that could not be colder flashed through his smile. "Wushuang, you're messing around too much," the middle-aged man said with an unhappy expression. Qing Wushuang lightly shook her head. "Elder Fa, I've carefully considered what I said just now." Among the 32 candidates for this year's martial feast, the weakest is at least at the 6th rank. Most of them are at the 7th rank. Although there are few at the 8th rank, it's not like there aren't any. These years, the requirements for the martial feast have been relaxed again and again, making it harder and harder to become the champion. If he really has the strength to become the champion, even if I marry him, it wouldn't be a disgrace to me. The middle-aged man sighed and said helplessly, "You decide for yourself." This second miss of the Qing family was good at everything, but she was too calculative. She could even coldly use her own life's most important matter as a transaction. After going through the law enforcement hall, the 2 of them paid their respects to the 3 elders of the law enforcement hall, the law enforcement hall, and the law enforcement hall. Only then did the ceremony of entering the Qing family officially come to an end. When Ning Chen returned to his small courtyard, he was already exhausted. The rules of the Qing family were really troublesome. These were only the rules of the guest elders. If he was officially bestowed the surname Qing, who knew how many tests he would have to go through? However, for the remaining 2 days, Ning Chen was much more relaxed. Qing Wushuang came once to deliver 2 swords, one heavy and one light. She told him to choose one. Ning Chen naturally didn't hesitate to take both swords. This caused Qing Wushuang to frown again. How could this guy be so greedy? This young master has always used dual swords. Ning Chen didn't care what Qing Wushuang was thinking. He arrogantly and shamelessly replied. As it turned out, this was well-founded. 2 days later, in the Qing family's selection, Ning Chen stubbornly used dual swords to fight for a spot. The elders of the Qing family weren't too surprised. This brat was a bit ugly, but his strength was unquestionable. No matter which family he was from in the capital, it wouldn't be difficult for him to obtain a spot. The slightly troublesome part was this brat's identity. According to him, he came from the Ni country in the south. However, they really didn't know when the Ni country had appeared in the world. The world was too big, and there were as many countries as there were hairs on an ox. Not being able to name them was even more common. They also had no way of determining whether it was real or fake. The spies they sent out had already gone south according to this brat's description. They couldn't really trust a person of unknown origin. If he wanted to become a member of the Qing family, he would have to go through many tests. Ning Chen's heart was clear about this. He was just practicing his drawing. As for whether or not he could find it, it had nothing to do with him. The imperial palace's martial feast was in 7 days. The entire Qing family attached great importance to it. They did their best to satisfy Ning Chen and the other two people's requests. Qing Wushuang didn't participate and gave her spot to someone else. Her cultivation method was special, and it wasn't convenient for her to reveal it at the martial feast. The Qing family was generous, so Ning Chen naturally wouldn't be polite. He took the opportunity to ask for a wheelchair. The one he was sitting on only cost a dozen or so taels of silver. It would probably break after a few fights. However, at this time, bad news came, causing the atmosphere of the Qing family to immediately become heavy. A 9th-rank guest elder had come to the capital's Shao family. Chapter 89. In this world, 9th-ranked martial artists were not as common as cabbages. Those under 35 years old were even rarer. Ning Chen used to think that 9th-ranked martial artists were worthless. Everyone he met was a 9th-ranked martial artist, and each one was younger than the last. After thinking about it, he realized that it was not because there were too many geniuses, but because there were too many geniuses in the palace. Xia Kingdom, the #1 country in the world, naturally had no lack of experts and geniuses in its palace. In fact, after he left the palace, this situation immediately disappeared. In this world, there were more normal people than monsters. Northern Meng royal court was much weaker than Xia Kingdom. The number and level of experts were also much lower. The few 9th-ranked martial artists in the Qing clan were all over 50 years old, and this was the result of many years of hard work in recruiting martial artists. It was too difficult to produce a 9th-ranked martial artist in the younger generation. The Qing clan did not have one, nor did the other clans in the capital. Unexpectedly, one came from the most inconspicuous Shao clan. The Qing clan and Shao clan were not on good terms. In other words, among the top 10 clans in the capital, there was no one who was truly friendly. The arrival of a 9th-ranked martial artist in the Shao clan was not good news for the rest of the clans. Ning Chen was helpless. He despised the Qing clan's luck. They all relied on external help. Those who were lucky got a 9th-ranked martial artist, and those who were unlucky got him. The martial arts banquet was approaching. The atmosphere in the capital was getting heavier by the day. 7 days later, the vast and magnificent desert city finally welcomed the most important event of the year. The leader of the Qing clan was Elder Fa from the Law Enforcement Hall. Qing Wushuang also followed beside him. The other two from the Qing clan were the best among the disciples with different surnames. One of them was a 7th-ranked martial artist, and the other was an 8th-ranked martial artist. Ning Chen still had that sloppy look on his face. He sat in his wheelchair and hummed a tune. His nostrils were up in the air, and he was extremely arrogant. Elder Fa was not a talkative person. As long as it was not too out of line, he would not care. Qing Wushuang even walked at the front of the group without looking back. The other two from the Qing clan had seen Ning Chen's strength. They knew that this guy was not as stupid as he looked, so they did not want to provoke him. Therefore, in the whole group, Ning Chen became the overlord. He was definitely the most eye-catching person. The palace of Northern Meng royal court was located in the center of the capital. Although it was not as magnificent and majestic as Xia Kingdom, it had its own unique style. The palaces rose and fell, creating a unique scene in the desert. The Qing family was neither the strongest nor the weakest of the 10 great families of the royal city, at least on the surface. The strongest family was, without a doubt, the royal Ming family. Ranked second was the Yang family, a family that had a position in the military that could not be underestimated. Comparatively speaking, the Qing family was somewhat inconspicuous, and the degree of attention they received was really ordinary. However, this year seemed to be an exception, because there was an idiot in the mistress's family. The Qing family had always kept a low profile. Now, the ugly young man in the wheelchair was too eye-catching. His nose was up in the air, and he looked like he was #1 in the world. It was hard for him not to be noticed. With regards to this kind of idiot, other than spitting in their hearts, everyone did not take it seriously. In the cultivation of martial arts, One's state of mind was as important as one's talent. If a person with such a bad personality wanted to succeed in martial arts, the sun would rise from the west. Of course, they didn't mean to insinuate the imperial preceptor. The imperial preceptor was a genius of his generation. How could ordinary people compare to him? In front of the palace, the people of the 10 great families were already in position. The Qing family was in the middle of the row on the right, and the leading family was the royal family, the Ming family. On the other side, the Yang family was at the front, and the Shao family was at the back. In front of the palace, the little emperor of northern Meng sat quietly on the dragon throne. Although his face was young, he already had the faint majesty of an emperor. Ning Chen raised his head and looked at the little emperor. His eyes narrowed slightly. Was this the son of the late emperor of northern Meng that Fan Lingyue helped up? Just from their first meeting, he was more or less a little weak. Even though he tried his best to maintain the majesty of an emperor, he still felt that something was missing. He believed in Fan Lingyue, just like he believed in himself. This little emperor would be a good emperor. Unfortunately, he was the emperor of northern Meng. It was impossible for Great Xia and northern Meng to have peace. As long as northern Meng wanted to go down south, the first obstacle they would face was Great Xia. The grudge between the two dynasties was a territorial issue. Unless northern Meng gave up on their ambition to go down south, the war would continue. Northern Meng having Fan Lingyue was the greatest misfortune of Great Xia. Let's begin. At this moment, the little emperor of northern Meng announced the start of the martial feast. His voice was a little soft and had the crispness of a child's voice. He sounded like a girl. Other than the Yang family and the royal family, the Ming family, each of the 10 aristocratic families sent out 3 young experts. Including the 8 from the Yang and Ming families, there were a total of 32 people. The rules of the competition were very simple. They would draw lots and eliminate people one by one until the top 4 were decided. Then, they would fight in pairs to decide the top 3. Ning Chen was the first in the first round, and his opponent was a girl who was a 6th-grade martial artist. It could be said that he was the best of the best. The remaining 2 from the Qing family were not so lucky. An 8th-grade martial artist would meet a 7th-grade martial artist, and a 7th-grade martial artist would meet an 8th-grade martial artist. Ning Chen's smile became even more brilliant. The scar on his face kept wriggling, making the surrounding people want to hide far away. The wheelchair squeaked on the stone floor. Ning Chen came to the center of the martial feast and stabbed his heavy sword into the ground. Looking at the girl opposite him, he laughed loudly and said, "Come, I will give you a handicap of my legs." Bah! Everyone couldn't help but spit in their hearts. This person's face was already unparalleled. If you have the ability, then don't give me a handicap. The girl opposite him clearly had a good temper and was even a bit nervous. She even stuttered a word of thanks. The scene was too strange. The 10 aristocratic families' people were a bit dizzy. The fight hadn't even started yet, but they already felt that there was nothing to see. The following fight was not as they had guessed. It was extremely boring. The thick-skinned man and the stuttering girl exchanged over 100 moves before the thick-skinned man won. "I'm so tired." Ning Chen put on an act, panting as he walked back. "Don't go easy on me in the next fight." Qing Wushuang indifferently said. "Oh, you even saw through that?" Ning Chen pretended to be surprised. "Don't think that other than you, everyone else is an idiot. Whether or not I went easy on you, everyone will know." Qing Wushuang coldly replied. I'm a person who has tender feelings for the fairer sex." Ning Chen shook his head and sighed. Qing Wushuang didn't say anything else. She felt uncomfortable talking to this guy. As long as he could win, he could fight however he wanted. Ning Chen gave this martial feast a disgusting start. After the last round of competition, everyone's appetite wasn't whetted again. The Qing family's 7th rank was eliminated without a doubt. The 8th rank advanced. Including Ning Chen, there were 2 in total. The results were neither good nor bad. In the second round, Ning Chen wasn't the first. He was placed in the middle. His opponent was a 7th rank. In the end, Ning Chen barely advanced. The Qin family's 8th rank also advanced. It was an easy fight. After all, most people were still 7th ranks. In the third round, Ning Chen's opponent was still a 7th rank. After fighting for a long time, he once again won by half a move. Immediately, the whole place was filled with boos and jeers. The Qin family's 8th rank met an 8th rank expert from the Imperial Ming family and was eliminated. The top 4 came out. The Ming family, the Yang family, and the Shao family each had one person. 2 8th ranks, 1 9th rank, and finally the lucky thick-skinned man, Ning Chen. When the rankings came out, Ning Chen used up his bullshit and directly faced the Shao family's 9th rank. The Ming and Yang family's 8th rank experts were also tit for tat. No one showed weakness. Then, Ning Chen admitted defeat. The banquet was filled with boos, curses, and mockery. The young people were full of anger. They had been unhappy with this person for a long time. If they didn't vent their anger, they would suffocate to death. The Shao family's 9th rank didn't win. He smoothly won a round. However, the top 4 rule was that everyone had to fight 3 rounds. The result was still unknown. The Ming and Yang family's 8th rank experts fought fiercely. Both of them were at the peak of rank 8 and could step into rank 9 at any time. It could be said that they were evenly matched. They didn't dare to hold back in every move. In the end, both of them were injured. The stronger Ming family's 8th rank expert won this difficult battle by a single move. The Yang family's 8th rank expert was crippled. In the last move, his Qi Ocean was injured. It was hard to say if the Ming family's 8th rank expert did it on purpose. However, the Yang family was the last to be eliminated without a doubt. Ning Chen was foolishly guaranteed to be in the top 3. For a moment, he couldn't react. The Yang family's 8th rank expert was crippled. Ning Chen's battle was empty. The other battle was between the Ming family's 8th rank and the Shao family's 9th rank. The battle between the 9th and 8th ranks didn't have much suspense. The Shao family's 9th rank quickly won, and the Ming family's 8th rank lost. Then, Ning Chen admitted defeat again. This time, the surrounding people couldn't take it anymore. All kinds of curses rose and fell. Was this a competition? This was to disgust everyone. The few people from the Qin family also felt that they had lost face. The top 3 was too shameful. However, what kind of person was Ning Chen? He was so thick-skinned that he could withstand swords and sabers. No matter how strong you were, he wouldn't fight no matter how strong you were. The martial banquet's champion, 2nd place, and 3rd place, come up to receive your title. At this moment, the eunuch beside the northern Meng young emperor spoke in a hoarse voice. Immediately, the scene quieted down. Ning Chen grinned. The moment he had been waiting for had finally arrived. The wheelchair creaked. Ning Chen was on the left, the Shao family's 9th rank was in the middle, and the Ming family's 8th rank was on the right. They climbed up the stairs and arrived in front of the emperor. I am Bai Yutong. I wonder if I can ask your majesty to bear witness to something. Ning Chen looked at the young emperor and grinned. Speak, the young emperor said maturely. The Qin family's 2nd young miss once promised that as long as I took the position of champion, she would agree to marry me. She even asked your majesty to bear witness. Ning Chen's smile became more and more brilliant. The scars on his face also became more and more twisted. Ning Chen didn't lower his voice, so everyone present heard these words. At the same time they were puzzled, they saw a black light flash by. The Shao family's 9th rank, the Ming family's 8th rank. A sword without warning. Condensed with frost and dyed with blood, it drew the most beautiful light. It was so fast that no one saw it clearly, including the 2 people who had already fallen. Under the feet of the emperor, who dared to rashly perform martial arts. Now that the 2 of them are dead, will the champion be me? Ning Chen was laughing. There was madness in his laughter. The black sword in his hand dripped with blood, shocking everyone present. Chapter 90. Qing Ning had said before that there were no absolutes below the Khanate stage. Even a 10-year-old child could kill a 9th-rank powerhouse who was severely injured. Ning Chen was not a 10-year-old child. The Xiao family's 9th rank and the Ming family's 8th rank were not severely injured. However, they still could not dodge this attack. Because the thought of dodging did not even cross their minds. For some reason, they deserved to die. With the two dead, the little emperor was exposed in front of Ning Chen. How far was a distance of 3 feet? A little more than 10 meters was very close to a martial artist. However, how could the emperor not have a powerhouse by his side? When Ning Chen's sword moved, a figure appeared beside the emperor. A 9th rank, another 9th rank, and a true powerhouse who far surpassed the Xiao family's 9th rank. A powerful palm came at him, and the wheelchair shattered with a bang. However, the original figure in the wheelchair was gone. Ning Chen, who was crippled, could not dodge this attack. However, it did not mean that he could not dodge it with his legs intact. He had been in the wheelchair for many, many days just for this day. A 9th rank powerhouse was also human. Naturally, he would have a blind spot. With a blind spot, he would make a mistake in judgment. Ning Chen took advantage of this mistake and avoided the palm. He approached the little emperor and grabbed the latter's shoulder. "Your Majesty, please grant the marriage." Ning Chen stood beside the little emperor and said seriously. "How dare you?" The little emperor frowned and shouted angrily. "Your Majesty, please grant the marriage." Ning Chen was unmoved and replied calmly. Below the stone steps, the 10 families finally came to their senses. They were all shocked. No one expected such a drastic change in such a short time. Using force in front of the palace to force the emperor to grant the marriage was a capital offense. 9 generations of the family would be executed. The people from the Qing family were shocked, especially Qing Wushuang. Her expression was extremely ugly. This person wanted to consign the Qing family to eternal damnation. As expected, an old official in front of the palace looked angry. He looked at the people from the Qing family and said sternly, "Let him go." Qing Wushuang walked forward and said gloomily, "Bai Yutang, I agree to marry you. Let go of the emperor." The rank 9 in front of the palace also tensed up. Once Ning Chen let go of the little emperor, he would immediately kill him. "If I believed you, then I would have lived 17 years in vain. Little emperor, come with me." As soon as he finished speaking, Ning Chen grabbed the little emperor and walked step by step towards the palace. When he passed by the middle of the martial feast, he stopped for a moment and said calmly, "Qing Wushuang, go and prepare a horse. My patience is limited. I hope you can hurry up." Hearing this, Qing Wushuang frowned, unable to conceal the fury in her heart. Just as she was about to flare up, she was stopped by a voice. "Do as he says," the old official in front of the palace said angrily. Qing Wushuang snorted coldly and left quickly. Ning Chen grabbed the little emperor and walked out of the palace step by step. A large group of people followed behind him. They did not dare to get too close, nor did they dare to stay too far away. The little emperor was very stubborn. He didn't beg for mercy at all. Ning Chen admired him in his heart. This little guy was very good. It seemed like that woman Fan Lingyue had groomed an incredible successor for the Northern Meng royal court. Talent, knowledge, the way of ruling a country, anything could be learned. However, the bearing of the ruler of a country could not be lost. Otherwise, if even the emperor begged for mercy, what would happen to the subjects of the entire Northern Meng? After a large number of guards in the palace surrounded them, they had no choice but to make way. They watched Ning Chen walk out of the palace with the little emperor. Behind them, the imperial 9th grade followed step by step, waiting for an opportunity to save the emperor. However, Ning Chen had endured for so long. How could he make any mistakes at this time? Holding the little emperor in his left hand and the ink sword in his right hand, he never relaxed for a moment. At this distance, no one could save the little emperor except for Xiantian experts. He was a 7th grade. Perhaps he could not defeat the 9th grade, but it did not mean that he had no power to fight back. Before the 9th grade made a move, he had enough confidence to drag the little emperor down with him. Everyone present understood this point. Therefore, no one dared to make a move easily. No one dared to bear this great crime that would implicate 9 generations of their family. In front of the palace, Qing Wushuang led a horse over. Looking at Ning Chen, she asked with hatred, "Who exactly are you?" "Country of Enai, White Jade Hall," Ning Chen replied with a smile. Qing Wushuang was so angry that her chest felt stuffy. Even at this time, this guy still refused to give himself away. Next, a strange scene appeared in front of the people of Northern Meng's capital. An ugly man with a ferocious face led their little emperor and walked in front. Behind him, a woman led a horse and followed closely behind. Behind them, the civil and military officials, as well as the people of the 10 great clans, followed closely behind. Everyone's expression was extremely ugly, as if they had eaten a fly. Northern Meng's capital was not small. Ning Chen led a large group of people and walked for a total of 8 hours. They walked from morning to sunset before they finally left the city. The little emperor's face had already turned pale. A journey of 8 hours was unbearable for a 7-year-old child, but the little emperor still gritted his teeth and persevered. Ning Chen admired this little guy more and more. Threads of true qi flowed through his arm and into the little emperor's body, silently helping him to relieve his fatigue. Night fell and a cold wind began to blow. The night in the desert was very beautiful. The entire sky was clean, and one could see the stars and the bright moon in the sky. The majestic group finally arrived outside the capital. "Ride your horse and wait for me at the sand pavilion 30 li east." Ning Chen turned to look at Qing Wushuang and said seriously. Qing Wushuang's expression immediately changed. Every word of this sentence struck at her heart. He wanted her and the Qing family to die without a burial ground. "Do as he says." The old official in the court spoke again with a gloomy expression. Qing Wushuang had no choice but to mount her horse. With a light shout, she rode east. Seeing Qing Wushuang disappear without a trace, Ning Chen grinned at the people behind him. Then, he did something that no one had expected. Ning Chen ran, carrying the little emperor as he ran for his life. While everyone was stunned, only a shadow was left in front of them. If a 7th-rank martial artist ran for his life without a care for anything, he would be faster than a warhorse. The 9th-rank consecrator in front of the palace was the first to react. He stamped his foot and immediately followed. Then, the elders and young experts of the 10 great clans also came to their senses and chased with all their strength. Ning Chen felt helpless. He had no choice but to run. Staying here was just courting death. As for a plan, there was no plan. This was Northern Meng's territory, and the senior was not here. Who knew what to do? He was so nervous that he broke out in a cold sweat when he was able to kidnap the little emperor. The little emperor kept struggling, and Ning Chen slapped the little guy's butt. He liked people who were not violent and did not cooperate. The little emperor bit his lips and tears welled up in his eyes, but he would rather die than cry. His stubborn appearance coupled with his delicate little face made him look like a child who was at odds with his parents. Ning Chen led a large group of people and ran for his life. He did not care about the direction. As he ran, he did not even know where he had run to. Suddenly, 2 shocking sword chi soared into the sky and collided with a loud bang. The surrounding heaven and earth could not bear the huge force and shook violently. In an instant, the world shook and a sandstorm surged. Fuck! Seeing a huge wave of sand come crashing down, Ning Chen only had time to curse before he was buried by the sand. The consecrators in front of the palace and the young and old of the 10 great clans were not any better. They were smashed into the yellow sand by this terrifying wave. In the next moment, a dark yellow light flashed and Ning Chen carried the little emperor out of the sand. He did not say anything and ran away. Fortunately, he had the dust scroll and the power of thick earth in his body, which played a big role at the crucial moment. After 10 breaths of time, the consecrators in front of the palace came out. They raised their heads to look for Ning Chen and the little emperor, but they could no longer see their shadows. The elders and young experts of the 10 great clans also came out of the sand one after another. They were all confused and did not know what was going on. After a while, they came to their senses and their hearts sank. The emperor was lost. He was kidnapped by a 7th-rank young man. This was a great humiliation for the Northern Meng imperial court. Everyone's expression became very ugly. They knew that this time, the capital would most likely face a huge purge. Send someone to inform the military advisor of today's matter. In addition, lock up the entire Qing family in the sand dungeon. Kill anyone who resists. The consecrators in front of the palace said coldly. Yes. An elder and 3 young experts of the Ming family respectfully accepted the order. They immediately went forward and restrained Elder Fa and the 2 young men of the Qing family. The rest of the 8 great clans did not dare to make a sound. At this time, whoever asked for mercy would be courting death. Moreover, they could not plead for mercy. The 3 of them did not dare to resist and allowed the experts of the Ming family to seal their qi seas. The only result of resistance was death. Now, their last hope was that His Majesty could be found as soon as possible. On the other side, Ning Chen ran for another 2 hours. Seeing that no one was following him, he finally let out a sigh of relief. He threw the little emperor down and lay down, panting heavily. The sand was very soft. Even so, the little emperor's mouth was puckered from the pain. After resting for a while, Ning Chen sat up and looked at the little emperor beside him. He curiously asked, "What is your name?" The little emperor turned his head. His expression was angry and he refused to answer. When Ning Chen saw this, he was immediately unhappy. Did he have any awareness of being a hostage? Was he really not going to cooperate without violence? Little guy, it's just the 2 of us now. If I'm not happy and leave you here, I guarantee that when your officials find you, you'll be left with only bones. After saying this, Ning Chen patted his butt and stood up. He really had the intention to leave. My name is Mingyu. The little emperor could not bear it and replied awkwardly. His voice was soft and crisp. It was very pleasant to hear. No matter how strong a child was, he was still afraid of being left alone in this endless desert. Ning Chen frowned. He felt that something was wrong. A child would not lie. It was just that the name Mingyu sounded very awkward. Today in front of the palace, when he heard the little emperor's voice, he felt that something was wrong. At that time, he thought that it was because the child had not changed his voice. Thinking of this, Ning Chen went forward and grabbed the little emperor's arm. He injected his qi and his expression immediately changed. He could not help but curse again. Fuck. Chapter 91. A girl. Ning Chen wasn't a doctor, so he wasn't good at checking the yin and yang qi in the meridians. However, he wasn't blind. This was clearly a girl's meridians. The little emperor panicked. She hurriedly withdrew her arm and took a few steps back. Her face was pale. You're a girl? Ning Chen asked seriously. No. The little emperor shook her head in a panic, but that crisp and soft voice made the already weak denial seem even more feeble. Ning Chen sighed and didn't ask any more questions. The little emperor's panicked expression confirmed his judgment once again. Northern Meng's little emperor was actually a girl. What a pitiful and ridiculous thing. It turned out that the previous emperor of Northern Meng didn't leave behind any princes. No wonder Fan Lingyue killed all the eunuchs and maids in the palace as soon as he came to power. Fan Lingyue's guts were really big. He actually helped a little princess to the throne. Ning Chen's mind was in a mess. Logically speaking, he should use this secret to threaten Fan Lingyue and even spread the news, causing chaos in Northern Meng's court. However, this was a child after all. Once the truth was exposed, the anger of the entire Northern Meng would be focused on this 7-year-old girl. It was obvious how terrible the consequences would be. A girl in power was still not accepted in this world, let alone a female emperor. There could only be one Fan Lingyue. This was also the limit of what Northern Meng's subjects could accept. Little Mingyu seemed to have thought of something. Her face was pale as she squatted on the ground and shivered. She no longer looked stubborn and looked extremely pitiful. Ningchen couldn't bear it. Even if his heart was as hard as steel, he couldn't do such a cruel thing. He was a human. No matter how cold-blooded and heartless he was, he still had a heart. If the little emperor had grown up, he would definitely spread the news without hesitation and cause Northern Meng to fall into chaos. However, the one in front of him was just a little girl who had just turned 7. Get up, I won't tell anyone. Ningchen walked forward and sighed softly. Hearing this, Mingyu raised her head. Her face was filled with shock, disbelief, and a trace of hope. A gentleman keeps his word. I said I won't tell anyone, so I definitely won't. Ningchen looked at Mingyu and said seriously. Really? Mingyu's beautiful eyes were filled with hope as she asked weakly. Really? Ningchen nodded. Of course, even if he didn't say anything, he wouldn't completely give up on this weakness of his. He still had to get something from Fan Lingyue. However, these were all the schemes between adults, and had nothing to do with the little emperor. Hearing Ningchen's promise, Mingyu stood up obediently. Her impression of the former improved a lot. She realized that the ugly man in front of her wasn't completely a bad person. If you send us back, we won't kill you. Mingyu hesitated for a moment before making what she thought was a huge concession. Ningchen slapped little Mingyu's head and said, Don't talk about me like that in front of me. I don't like it. Also, do you think I won't kill you just because you said so? Those officials of yours can't wait to eat me up. Mingyu cried out in pain. This emperor. Just as she opened her mouth, she saw that Ning Chen's palm was about to land on her. She immediately changed her words, I am the emperor of the Northern Meng royal court. I don't want you to die. If anyone dares to oppose this emperor will kill him. Domineering. Ning Chen gave him a thumbs up in his heart. This little emperor had a great style. We'll talk about this later. Let's get out of this desert first. Ning Chen didn't want to continue this topic. Instead, he used the moonlight to look around. He suddenly felt dizzy. It was the same everywhere. How were they supposed to get out? Mingyu didn't dare to refute and looked around as well. Her dark eyes were filled with confusion. She also didn't know how to get out. Do you know which way to go? Ning Chen asked. I don't know. Mingyu answered honestly. Ning Chen was very unhappy and said with disdain, Emperor, you don't even know how to get to your own country. Mingyu was speechless. The Northern Meng royal court was so big. How could she know everything clearly? Forget it. Let's go this way. Ning Chen randomly chose a direction and then pulled Mingyu forward. However, after taking 2 steps, Ning Chen felt that something was wrong. He looked at the little girl and asked, You can't walk anymore? I can walk. Mingyu bit her lips and said. Ning Chen frowned. He squatted down and untied Mingyu's shoes. With one look, his expression couldn't help but darken. The little girl's white and tender feet already had several blisters. Some of the skin had already broken, revealing bright red flesh. It looked a bit miserable. Ning Chen felt helpless. This little girl was too stubborn. She was already in this state, but she still refused to make a sound. Speaking of which, it was also his fault. They had walked for more than 8 hours today. Not to mention a little girl, even an adult wouldn't be able to take it. I'll carry you. Ning Chen carefully put the shoes back on Mingyu's feet and said. I can walk by myself. Mingyu's face was slightly red, but she still stubbornly said. You can either carry me or hug me. Choose. Ning Chen was angry and said angrily. Mingyu's expression changed again and again. In the end, she had no choice but to compromise. Carry me. Ning Chen's expression became a bit better. This little girl was asking for a beating. She only agreed to cooperate after he was angry. Come up. Ning Chen paused and glanced back at him. Mingyu slowly crawled up, her face turning even redder. In this world, the distance between men and women was far beyond imagination. Moreover, Mingyu was a member of the imperial family, so she knew even more. For example, a girl's feet couldn't be casually seen by a man. For example, it was taboo for a girl to be carried or hugged by a man. Previously, when they were running for their lives, they didn't have a choice and didn't think too much about it. However, the situation was different now. In the end, it didn't conform to etiquette. How could Ning Chen know so many things? Previously, when he was in the palace, he was basically a big boss. Other than Zhang Sun and Qing Ning, he didn't care about anyone else. Just as Zhang Sun was about to teach him some rules, he had already run away. Moreover, she was just a little girl. How could she be so calculative? The night in the desert was a bit cold. Ning Chen took off his clothes and put them on Mingyu. After all, she was still a little girl and her body was more delicate. Ning Chen felt that this hostage kidnapping was not worth it. Not only did he risk his life, he also had to treat her like an ancestor. Mingyu laid on Ning Chen's back. Feeling warm, she gradually became sleepy. However, at this time, Mingyu suddenly noticed that the scar on Ning Chen's face had opened a little. She couldn't help but feel a bit strange. She reached out her small hand and gently pulled. Then, the scar fell off with a patter. Ning Chen slapped the small hand in front of his face and threatened, "Don't mess around. Be careful or I'll throw you down." Mingyu wasn't really afraid. She could also tell that Ning Chen wasn't as bad as he looked. Moreover, once a woman's curiosity rose, nothing could stop her. Although Mingyu was just a little girl, she was still a woman. Mingyu's sleepiness was gone. She reached out her small hand and carefully tore off the scars on Ning Chen's face one by one. Ning Chen saw that scaring her didn't work, so he didn't bother with her and let her do whatever she wanted. After tearing off the scars, Mingyu looked at them again. She still felt a little uncomfortable. After thinking for a moment, she shifted her gaze to the beard in front of her. Behave. Ning Chen felt the little girl's gaze and helplessly reprimanded her. However, once you lose your dignity, it's hard to get it back. Mingyu was already sure that he wouldn't do anything to her. The fear in her heart faded. Mingyu's two small hands searched for a long time before she finally found the glued part of the beard. She carefully tore it off. Instantly, her beautiful big eyes curved into crescents with a smile. She was very cute. You look better now, Mingyu looked at Ning Chen's side profile and said in a soft and crisp voice. You have good taste, Ning Chen praised. The little girl really knew how to talk. I'm a little thirsty, Mingyu said. Ning Chen reached out his hand and a silver light lit up. Immediately, snowflakes fell. They were very small. This was the only snow in the desert. Mingyu put her two small hands on Ning Chen's big hands. She held the falling snowflakes and slowly accumulated a small amount of water. Are you thirsty? Mingyu asked. No, Ning Chen replied. Mingyu took a small sip and then put her small hand next to Ning Chen's mouth. She didn't say anything. Ning Chen drank the rest of the water. It was cool and very comfortable. Mingyu wiped her two small hands on Ning Chen's body. After drying them, she put her hands around his neck again. Can you walk out tomorrow? Mingyu asked softly. Yes, Ning Chen replied with certainty. Even if he couldn't, he had to. There was no food or water in the desert. He was still fine, but little Mingyu didn't have any martial arts foundation. She definitely couldn't handle it. Although he had rescued little Mingyu from the Beimeng Imperial Palace, he didn't want her to be hurt. He could be cold-blooded and heartless to everyone in the world, but he couldn't be cruel to a little girl. Moreover, before he saw Fan Lingyue, he couldn't let anything happen to little Mingyu. A normal military advisor was already scary enough, let alone a crazy military advisor. After we get out, I'll order people to capture you. However, I won't kill you. Mingyu's eyes gradually darkened as she murmured softly. Up to you. Ningchen continued walking step by step and replied calmly. Little Mingyu finally stopped talking and fell asleep from exhaustion. Today, this little girl had been frightened too much. No matter how strong she was, she couldn't take it anymore. Ningchen gently supported her with his hands so that little Mingyu could sleep more comfortably. When he turned his head, he saw that the little girl was still wearing the crown that symbolized imperial power. He couldn't help but frown. He carefully took it off and casually threw it into the desert. In the next moment, little Mingyu's long hair fell down like a waterfall and hung down behind her back. The night wind blew, and it fluttered gently. Occasionally, a few strands of hair would mischievously fall on Ning Chen's face. It was numb and itchy. Under the moonlight, above the desert, Ning Chen quietly walked step by step. He didn't say another word. On his back, the little girl was sleeping soundly. In her dream, there was no fear or struggle. Chapter 92. After Mingyue fell asleep, Ning Chen walked faster and faster. Under the night sky, he was like a white shadow, disappearing in the blink of an eye. The desert was unimaginably huge. The two of them had lost their way while running for their lives and could only head in one direction now. Fortunately, although the moon might not rise from the east, it would never change its pattern of heading west. If they kept walking in the direction of the moon, they would eventually walk out of the desert. Little Mingyue was in a deep sleep, her delicate little face still showed signs of fatigue. The little girl was indeed frightened previously. Fortunately, he was not a bad person. At least, that was what Ning Chen thought. However, he had kidnapped the little emperor of Northern Meng. The Northern Meng royal court would definitely be in chaos for a while. Fan Lingyue was only one person after all and couldn't take care of the throne. This was the best chance for Great Xia to take a breather. This woman was too powerful. If they continued to fight, no one knew what the outcome would be. The night passed quickly. When the sky was about to brighten, Ning Chen gradually saw the specks of oases in front of him. Northern Meng's territory was either desert or grassland. It was very barren and only sheep and horses could sustain their livelihood. This was also the reason why the people of Northern Meng were so valiant. The end of the desert meant that they could find food and water. Ning Chen walked faster, hoping to meet the herdsmen of the grassland earlier. Little Mingyue was still sleeping soundly. She looked very cute and was no longer the awkward little girl from before. Unfortunately, Ning Chen couldn't find any herdsmen even after searching for a long time. It seemed like there was no one living in this oasis. Actually, this wasn't strange. The Northern Meng royal court was vast but sparsely populated. It wasn't easy to meet someone in the vast grassland. There was a small river in the oasis. It wasn't big but he could see the silhouettes of fish. Little Mingyue needed to eat. After running with him for a day and a night, she was probably starving. Ning Chen gently put down little Mingyue and went to the river alone. With a stroke of his right hand, a silver light flashed and the entire river was frozen. A few small fish fell onto the ice. Ning Chen bent down and picked them up one by one. He then returned to the shore and prepared to start a fire to roast the fish. Little Mingyue woke up in a daze. She didn't know where she was. When she saw the vast grassland, she remembered that she was kidnapped. "What are you doing?" Mingyue sat up and rubbed her eyes. It was still a little cold in the morning. Little Mingyu wrapped herself in her oversized clothes and didn't want to move at all. Usually, at this time, court would have already ended. She had never slept so long before. Cooking, Ning Chen replied casually as he was cleaning up the fish. How do we start a fire? Ming Yu nodded and immediately raised a very practical question. Eat it raw, Ning Chen threatened. Jen, I'm not eating anymore. Ming Yu was indeed intimidated. She wrinkled her nose and looked a little worried. Goo goo. The little girl's stomach growled. Her worried little face became even more worried. Ning Chen tidied up the fish and picked up some firewood from the ground. Then, he walked in front of little Mingyue and sat down. He calmly took out a fire starter. As someone who often bombed other people's residences, how could he not have something to ignite the fire on him? Besides, even if he didn't bring this thing, he was already a 7th-ranked expert. Drilling wood to get a fire was still doable. Ming Yu pouted. She was unhappy that the bad guy had lied to her. After starting the fire, Ning Chen skewered the fish with a branch and slowly roasted it. At this moment, Ming Yu's face turned slightly red. She shyly stood up and secretly ran away. After a while, she ran back. Of course, Ning Chen wasn't stupid enough to ask about everything. Little girls also knew how to be shy. After returning, little Ming Yu had already washed herself clean. Her face was also much cleaner. It was just that her oversized clothes looked a little out of place. The northern Meng royal family's bloodline was different from the people of the Central Plains. They looked a little exotic. The little girl inherited all her mother's good points. She already showed the potential of a beauty at a young age. Ning Chen was curious. It was fine now, but when little Mingyu grew up, how was she going to deceive those old officials? Fan Lingyue's health wasn't good. He probably couldn't wait until Mingyu grew up. When that time came, who would be able to hold up the sky for a little girl? Thinking of this, Ning Chen was a little irritated. When did he become so sentimental? Wasn't he looking forward to Fan Lingyue's early death and Northern Meng falling into chaos? The fish is done. Be careful, it's hot. Ning Chen passed the roasted fish to little Mingyu, suppressing the messy thoughts in his heart. He would talk about the future in the future. Who could be sure that the little girl wouldn't become the second Fan Lingyue? Mingyu had been watching since just now. When she saw the fish in front of her, her eyes immediately curved and she smiled like a crescent moon. The way the little girl ate was very refined. She took small bites and looked very pleasing to the eye. In comparison, Ning Chen was quite unparticular. He finished the fish in 3 bites and didn't even spit out the bones. Out of the 10 fish, little Mingyu ate 2. The remaining 8 were stuffed into Ning Chen's stomach. To him, these things were just filling the gaps between his teeth. If he was really full, there would probably be no more fish in this river in the future. After eating her fill, Mingyu's mood was obviously much better. She took the initiative to get up and hurry on with her journey. She didn't feel nervous at all as a hostage. Ning Chen was helpless. He had really kidnapped a little ancestor. The two of them set off together and headed south along the grassland. The grassland was very beautiful. Mingyu had never left the palace before and had never heard of such a large grassland. Therefore, she was very curious about everything along the way. Looking at the greenery that gradually covered the ground, she would run a few steps and pick up a small flower. Her smile was very bright. Ning Chen didn't care about her. It was fine as long as she was within his sight and didn't run away. What's your name? Mingyu ran to the front, turned around and asked curiously. She still didn't know his real name. As for the name by Yutong, even an idiot would know that it was fake. Ning Chen. Ning Chen answered honestly. Mingyu thought hard and then said, Sister Lingyue mentioned you in the letter. She said that you're not a good person and we have to be careful. Ning Chen was speechless. Fan Lingyue really thought highly of him, instilling the idea of being on guard against him in little Mingyu so early. Actually, he and Fan Lingyue weren't good people. He was ruthless, but Fan Lingyue was even more ruthless. The difference between the two of them was just 50 steps and 100 steps. When we meet the herdsman, change your clothes. It's too conspicuous. Ning Chen didn't argue with the little girl and instead suggested. She came out in a hurry, so little Mingyu was still wearing the little yellow robe she wore during the imperial court. It was indeed very conspicuous. Mingyu wrinkled her little nose. After a moment, she seemed to have thought of something. Touching her head, she couldn't help but feel a little anxious. Zhen, where's my crown? I threw it away. Ning Chen didn't care. What was the use of that thing? It was so heavy and would affect a child's development. How can you throw away my things? Mingyu was furious. She pointed at the bad guy in front of her and said crisply. You're my hostage now, why can't I throw it away? Ning Chen reminded the little girl of her current identity. You're a bad guy. Mingyu was so angry that her little chest puffed up. Ha, I never said that I was a good person. Ning Chen said leisurely. Which good person would do something like taking a hostage? Moreover, he was taking the emperor of a dynasty. Mingyu turned her face away and decided to ignore him. She walked in front angrily. Ning Chen didn't mind and slowly followed behind her. Wherever the little girl went, he would follow. He wasn't in a hurry to travel yet. The one who should be in a hurry wasn't him, but the Northern Meng Imperial Court and Fan Lingyue. In the end, little Mingyu was too bored by herself and took the initiative to compromise. She once again made a big concession. I forgive you. Mingyu stopped and waited for Ning Chen to catch up. Ning Chen smiled. This little girl was quite magnanimous. He thought that she was going to argue with him for a while. Okay, let's make up. Ning Chen stretched out his hand and smiled. Okay. Mingyu put her little hand in his big hand and let the bad guy hold it. Are we going to Grand Xia? Mingyu suddenly asked. Yes. Ning Chen nodded. He still had to return to Grand Xia in the end. Are you going to hand me over to the Emperor of Grand Xia? Mingyu looked a little sad. She wasn't stupid and naturally knew her value. No. Ning Chen denied without hesitation. He had risked his life to rescue little Mingyu. Why should he hand her over to the Emperor of Grand Xia? Moreover, the Emperor of Grand Xia seemed to have changed into a different person. Mingyu wouldn't be able to survive in his hands. Mingyu raised her little face and asked in surprise, then why did you kidnap me? Ning Chen didn't know how to answer. He really hadn't seriously considered this question. The main reason he kidnapped little Mingyu was to make Fan Lingyue have misgivings. As for how to deal with little Mingyu, he really didn't have any ideas. We'll see. If Fan Lingyue can withdraw her troops, I'll return you to her. Ning Chen thought for a while before answering. What if Sister Lingyue refuses? Mingyu was a little worried. We'll talk about it when the time comes. In any case, I won't hand you over to the Emperor of Grand Xia. You don't have to be afraid. Ning Chen promised. Mingyu smiled happily. She realized that the bad guy wasn't that bad. If you send me back, I'll make you a high official. Mingyu promised very seriously. How high? Ning Chen asked. Mingyu thought for a while before replying, I'll make you a great general. Ning Chen thought for a while. Indeed, it wasn't low. The position of a great general in Grand Xia should be second only to the 10 marquises and on the same level as the city lords. What if Fan Lingyue wants to kill me? Ning Chen asked again. I'll protect you. Sister Lingyue dotes on me a lot. I'll put in a good word for you. Mingyu patted her little chest and said. Ning Chen also smiled. This little girl still had a conscience. She didn't provide for him in vain. In the future, if he really couldn't survive in Grand Xia, little Mingyu would still take him in. Okay, after the war between Grand Xia and Northern Meng is over, I'll send you back. Ning Chen replied softly. Mingyu nodded vigorously. Her little hand grasped his big hand tightly, unwilling to let go. She knew that this would be the only person she could rely on after entering Grand Xia. On the grassland, the big hand held the small hand and Yi walked alone at a steady pace. It looked so peaceful and beautiful. Chapter 93. The little emperor of Northern Meng had been kidnapped. 2 days later, this news spread throughout the world like an earthquake. The entire world was in an uproar. This was even more shocking than De Xia's gate pass being breached. After hearing this news, everyone had different reactions. Some rejoiced, and some were disappointed. The war between Northern Meng and De Xia had reached its most critical point. Such a thing happening now would undoubtedly have a huge impact on the war. De Xia was already in imminent danger. Anyone with a discerning eye could see De Xia's current predicament. Up until now, De Xia's strongest force, the 10 marquises, had betrayed them. Marquis Bloodclad and Marquis Taiping were heavily injured. Marquis Jiu, Marquis Xiang, and Marquis Bai were blocked outside Heaven's Gate. On the other side, the Eternal Night cult came aggressively. Their martial lords and 3 peak 9th rank generals were too powerful. Only Marquis Triumphant Return could resist them. In the southwest, there was the Du Yi Temple. Marquis Wangchuan could not return either. As for the southeast, Menyang country was ambitious and could invade again at any time. The 2 dynasties had been fighting on and off for decades and had never been at peace. De Xia had always been wary of this country that was even more shameless than Jinji country. No matter what, Marquis Zhongyong would never return. Due to various reasons, De Xia, which originally had many soldiers and generals, fell into a situation where there were no generals available. De Xia, which had been invincible for 1,000 years, was defeated again and again by a woman's schemes. It was a huge irony. Now, this awkward situation was likely to change because of the kidnapping of the little emperor. De Xia needed a variable that could change the current unfavorable situation. In front of the Northern Meng army, Fan Lingyue, who was still marching, received this news. Her expression immediately became gloomy and she immediately gave the order to set up camp. It was him. He was actually still alive. That ink sword was given by her. How could she not recognize it? She didn't expect that not only did he not die, but he also gave her such a big surprise. Military advisor Qing Wuyo knelt on the ground with a pleading expression. Qing family has made a mistake. Naturally, they have to pay the price. I know what I'm doing. Also, tell Qing Wuhan to do her job well. Don't let the cat out of the bag, Fan Lingyue said coldly. Yes. Qing Wuyo sighed in her heart and accepted the order. In the barbarian dynasty, the barbarian king stood in the hall with a displeased expression. Not only was that kid not dead, but he had also caused such a huge commotion. Wild was holding a letter in her hand. As she read it, a happy smile appeared on her beautiful face. A man's way of thinking was always different from the average person. The things she paid attention to were also different. She only saw that he was at the 7th rank and that his legs had recovered. He's at the 7th rank. A man raised his head and gazed at his father. The barbarian king didn't react for a moment. After being stunned for a moment, he remembered the agreement between them. For a moment, he was even more upset. According to this kid's cultivation progress, peak rank 9 should not be too slow. Did that not mean that his precious daughter would soon leave him? How unpleasant. In the Weiyang Palace of the Great Xia, Zhang Sun and Qing Ning were stunned when they heard the news. They looked at each other and were so shocked that they couldn't speak. Without a doubt, this matter was definitely done by Ning Chen. There were many people in the world with crippled legs, but there were very few people who could fight so well while sitting in a wheelchair. Needless to say, no one but Ning Chen would do such a sinister and daring thing as standing up from the wheelchair to kidnap the little emperor of the Northern Meng. Why did he go there? Zhang Sun couldn't understand. After King Yen took Ning Chen away for treatment, there had been no news of him. Who would have thought that once there was news, it would be such a shocking matter? Qing Ning couldn't answer either. No one in the world could understand that kid's way of thinking. It wouldn't be strange even if he blew up the northern Meng Palace. In the Heavenly Mandate Palace, Emperor Xia read the intelligence sent by his spy. A smile gradually appeared on his gloomy face. After a moment, he actually laughed maniacally. The heavens were on Great Xia's side, the heavens were on Great Xia's side. Ning Chen and little Mingyu didn't know what the outside world was like. They were still walking hand in hand on the grasslands. The grasslands were bigger than the desert. The two of them walked until they were disgusted and still hadn't walked out. Mingyu was a little tired. She asked, "How long do we have to walk?" "Tired?" Ning Chen asked. "Yes," Mingyu said in annoyance. "Should I carry you?" Ning Chen suggested. "Okay." Mingyu nodded without hesitation. Thus, Ning Chen carried little Mingyu on his back again. The little girl was very light. She didn't weigh much on his back. She probably wasn't even as heavy as his ink sword. "Bad guy!" Mingyu shouted. "Yes," Ning Chen replied. He didn't agree with this nickname that the little girl gave him. How was he a bad guy? "When we get to the Great Xia, you have to protect me," Mingyu said worriedly. "Okay," Ning Chen nodded. "I'm serious," Mingyu said. "I'm serious too," Ning Chen replied. Mingyu hugged his neck tightly and said softly, "Bad guy, you have to do what you say. If I'm taken away by others, I won't live anymore." She knew very well what would happen if she fell into the hands of others. When that time came, wanting to die would be an extravagant hope. She might as well end her own life. "As long as I live." Ning Chen didn't say the rest. He was the one who rescued little Mingyu. Naturally, he would protect her. As long as he lived, no one could take her away. Mingyu understood the meaning behind Ning Chen's words. She put her little face on his back and quietly closed her eyes. She was a little tired and wanted to sleep for a while. Ning Chen temporarily slowed down his pace. After little Mingyu fell asleep, he quickened his pace again. At this moment, the sound of horse hooves and the creaking of wheels could be heard from afar. It came from the south and was gradually approaching. Ning Chen quickened his pace and quickly walked forward. If he guessed correctly, it should be a caravan heading north. As it turned out, this was indeed a caravan heading towards the northern Meng kingdom. When the manager of the caravan saw Ning Chen, he was a little surprised. In this boundless grassland, it was very easy to get lost and starve to death if one were to walk alone. "Mingyu, wake up," Ning Chen called out softly. The little girl who had just fallen asleep was obviously very grumpy when she woke up. She pushed Ning Chen's face away unhappily and immediately buried her head back to sleep. Ning Chen had no choice but to give up. He smiled apologetically at the manager of the caravan and then requested to buy some food and clothes. When the manager of the caravan saw the big clothes draped over the little girl's body, he more or less understood what was going on. He took out a set of clothes that he had bought for his daughter and very kindly gave it to little Mingyu. Ning Chen was a little touched. However, at the same time, he couldn't help but lament that there were such kind people in every dynasty in the world. Why did they always have to fight? After the caravan had left, Ning Chen sighed softly and was about to continue his journey when he heard the rumbling sound of horse hooves coming from the southwest. It was very hurried and sounded like there were more than 20 horses. In the next moment, a cloud of dust rose as the horses passed by from afar, rushing north. Ning Chen didn't care at first, but after taking 2 steps, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. These people seemed to be heading towards the caravan just now. Thinking of this, Ning Chen immediately turned around and moved his feet, turning into a shadow and rushing forward. He hoped that his guess was wrong. "Kill them. Take the women and the goods. Don't leave anything else behind." Just as Ning Chen arrived 100 steps away from the caravan, he heard a cold voice. The caravan was in chaos. No one had thought that they would run into horse bandits here. What merchants feared the most was horse bandits who killed and robbed. These people were inhumane and only knew how to burn, kill, and rob. However, just as the horse bandits were about to attack, a black light flashed and blood spurted out. Unfortunately, although the horse bandits were inhumane, they had run into Ning Chen, who was even more inhumane. Compared to killing, he was better at it. The black sword was as fast as the wind, mercilessly reaping the life of each horse bandit. Everyone only saw a blur before their eyes as a shadow flashed past. 27 horse bandits were all killed. "I'll give the horses to you," said Ning Chen, then turned and left. Only then did the people in the caravan come back to their senses. They were all shocked. No one had thought that the young man just now was actually such a terrifying expert. Kindness is rewarded. This was the thought that flashed through everyone's minds. If the consul hadn't kindly given the young man clothes and food, they probably wouldn't have been able to escape this disaster. "Bad guy, you're really handsome," praised little Mingyu, who had woken up at some point. "I've always been handsome." Ning Chen accepted the little girl's praise without hesitation. "You were the most handsome just now," praised Mingyu. "Ha, you really know how to talk," laughed Ning Chen. "Can you walk on your own?" "Okay." Little Mingyu nodded and jumped down. "Clothes." Ning Chen handed over the clothes the steward had given him. When Mingyu saw that it was a little girl's clothes, she hesitated. She had only worn men's clothes since she was young and had never worn women's clothes. "Change into them," said Ning Chen softly. Mingyu made up her mind and took the clothes. She whispered, "Turn around." Ning Chen was speechless and obediently turned around. This little girl really knew how to be shy. Mingyu wrinkled her nose and made a funny face. She then took off her little dragon robe with a slightly red face and began to change her clothes. "Don't turn around," shouted Mingyu worriedly. "I won't turn around," Ning Chen helplessly replied. She wasn't a big girl, so what was there to be afraid of? After a while, little Mingyu finished changing her clothes. Her face was red as she whispered, "Okay, you can turn around now." Ning Chen turned around. When he saw her, his eyes couldn't help but light up. What a delicate little girl. Although little Mingyu also looked good in the dragon robe, because of the way she was dressed, she was more neutral. Now, little Mingyu's crown had been thrown away and she had changed into a girl's clothes. It was obvious that she was beginning to show the gentle beauty that a little girl should have. All in all, little Mingyu could still score above 90 points. "Do I look good?" asked Mingyu a little embarrassedly. "Yes," said Ning Chen honestly. "You really know how to talk." Little Mingyu's eyes curved into crescent moons. Chapter 94. A day later, Ning Chen and little Mingyu finally left the grassland and arrived at a city in northern Meng. The two found an inn in the city, paid the tavern and went straight to the second floor. Ning Chen sat in the room in a daze. He needed to think carefully about what to do after returning to Great Xia. Now that he had little Mingyu with him, he would definitely be hunted down by countless forces, especially Emperor Xia, who would definitely be even crazier this time. Little Mingyu didn't care so much. She lay on the bed and slept. After walking for so many days, she was already exhausted. Ning Chen was a little worried. He knew that he couldn't hide his identity for long. Besides Northern Meng, there were at least 4 people who had already guessed that he was the one who kidnapped the little emperor. Zhang Sun, Barbarian King, Fan Lingyue, and Emperor Xia. In this world, there would always be enemies among those who understood you the most. Fan Lingyue and Emperor Xia were the best examples. Fan Lingyue was still fine, but little Mingyu was in his hands and would definitely have some scruples. Now, his greatest enemy was Emperor Xia. Once this lunatic went crazy, he would do anything. He didn't doubt that Emperor Xia had already set up an inescapable net for him to jump into. Last time, it was the Dark Shadow Squad. This time, it would probably be the Dark Dragon Squad. The lowest cultivation of the Dark Dragon Squad in Great Xia was at least the 8th grade. As for the captain, the lowest was the 9th grade or even the peak of the 9th grade. Last time, Prince Yen blocked a 9th grade Dark Dragon Squad for him. This time, he might not be so lucky. Now, he could barely deal with one 9th grade expert. If there were more, he would have to risk his life. He didn't want to risk his life, so he had to think of a way to avoid the pursuit of the Dark Dragon Squad. At this moment, he and little Mingyu were in northern Meng, and no one could recognize him. However, it was hard to say in Great Xia. Back then, when he fought the emissary of the true extreme state in the palace, many people had seen him. Many of the Shadow Dragon guards who were hiding in the dark probably remembered his appearance. Great Xia and northern Meng bordered each other. After Beizhong Plains, it was Great Xia's Yangue City and Xingqiao Pass. Yangue City was now occupied by the northern Meng army, so it was impossible to go there. As for Xingqiao Pass, there would be countless people waiting for him to die. This was the most dangerous choice, but also the only choice. The only thing he was glad about now was that little Mingyu was a girl, which made things a lot easier for him. Everyone in the world knew that the little emperor of northern Meng had been kidnapped. Therefore, Qing dynasty would definitely check all the strangers who brought along a 7- or 8-year-old boy. As for the middle-aged man who brought along a little girl, no one would have the time to care about him. Thinking of this, Ning Chen got up and prepared to go out by himself. He was not worried that little Mingyu would run away. This little girl was very smart and knew that there were more people in the world who wanted to capture her than save her. In this world, there were only 3 places where little Mingyu would be the safest: Beimeng Imperial Palace, Fan Lingyue's side, and his side. Beimeng City wasn't as prosperous as Great Xia. Ning Chen spent a long time searching before he finally found what he wanted. After returning to his room, he fiddled with the mirror. However, disguising himself was not an easy task. Ning Chen spent nearly 4 hours trying, but he still did not achieve the desired effect. "You're so stupid." Little Mingyu had woken up at some point and was sitting on the bed, curling her lips. She finally knew why the bad guy had disguised himself to be so ugly. It was not intentional. He was only at this level. Ning Chen was slightly ashamed. It was indeed embarrassing to be looked down upon by a little girl. Looking at his 2 hands, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. As expected, they looked like feet. "I'll help you." Mingyu put on her shoes and jumped off the bed. She walked to the front, took over the skin wax, rubber, blades, and other tools, and carefully cleaned up Ning Chen's face. "What do you want me to look like?" "Just look a little older." As he spoke, Ning Chen sat there, not daring to move. He was afraid that little Mingyu would accidentally disfigure him with a blade. Mingyu understood tacitly. Her little face was extremely focused as she used the tools in her hands to dress him up bit by bit. After the little girl had washed up, there was a faint milky fragrance on her body. It was very comfortable to smell and made people feel at ease. This proved that when it came to makeup, women would always be better than men. After an hour, little Mingyu clapped her hands and took half a step back. She said with satisfaction, "Take a look yourself." Ning Chen turned around and looked at the mirror on the table. He sighed in his heart. Comparing goods, throwing away, comparing hands, chopping. How could little Mingyu be so clever with her hands? The middle-aged man in the mirror had sharp eyebrows and bright eyes. There were faint lines at the corners of his eyes, but it did not affect the overall appearance. Instead, it gave people a mature feeling. In short, there was only one word to describe him: handsome. Amazing. Ning Chen gave a thumbs up and praised. Of course. Little Mingyu didn't know what modesty was and naturally accepted the praise. After waiting for a while, the rubber on his face was almost dry. Ning Chen carefully tore off the mask and put it away. Then, he looked at the gradually darkening sky outside and asked, "Are you hungry? Do you want to eat in or go out?" Let's go out and eat. Mingyu thought for a while and stretched out her little hand. Ning Chen naturally took the little girl's hand and walked downstairs to the main hall. At this time, it was dinner time. The tables downstairs were basically all full. There was only one empty table left. The two went up and sat down, then called the waiter to order. Ning Chen was not picky about food, but little Mingyu was very picky. It was no wonder. She had been an emperor since she was young and was tired of eating all kinds of delicacies. It was hard not to be picky. After the dishes were served, Mingyu didn't want to eat any more after a few bites. She put down her chopsticks and said, "It doesn't taste good." Ning Chen's head hurt. If it didn't taste good, what could he do? Roast the fish for me to eat. Mingyu continued to say pitifully. Ning Chen nodded helplessly and said, "Okay, wait here. Don't run around." After saying that, Ning Chen got up and walked towards the kitchen of the inn. There should be fish in the kitchen. He would buy it himself and roast it for little Mingyu. The kitchen was not far from the main hall. After Ning Chen went in, he stated his purpose for coming. The head chef readily agreed. This was not something excessive. It was difficult to please everyone. No matter how good a chef was, he could not guarantee that everyone would like to eat the dishes he made. Ning Chen gratefully paid the money and grabbed a fish. After carefully cleaning it, he borrowed a stove and carefully roasted it. "Is that little girl your younger sister?" the chef asked as he cooked the dishes. "Yes," Ning Chen replied. "You're a good person," the head chef said seriously. "Ha!" Ning Chen chuckled and didn't say anything. If he was a good person, then there would be no bad people in the world. He was never a good person. He was just being himself. "I also have a little sister. She's 3 years younger than me. When she was young, she was very naughty. Once, I couldn't help but hit her. Mother taught me that the reason why an older brother should be born before his younger sister is because he needs to grow up faster so that he can protect his younger sister. From then on, I never fought with my younger sister again." Unfortunately. The head chef's face darkened. He sighed and didn't say anything else. "My condolences." Ning Chen's expression was calm as he slowly said, "I'm fine. It's been many years." The head chef wiped his wet eyes and forced a smile. "Treat her well. She's not a burden, but an honor in this life." The head chef's voice was slightly hoarse. "I definitely will." Ning Chen nodded. The fish was quickly cooked. Ning Chen thanked the head chef and then took the fish to the front hall. Little Mingyu was probably impatient from waiting. However, just as Ning Chen was about to enter the hall, he suddenly heard the sound of bowls and plates shattering. Feeling that something was wrong, he quickly walked over. When he arrived at the front of the hall and saw the scene inside, his expression immediately darkened. At the table before them were 3 finely dressed youths and a scantily clad woman. Little Mingyu stubbornly stood to the side, unwilling to leave. Her beautiful eyes were filled with tears. Ning Chen's anger immediately overflowed. He calmly walked forward. Just as he was about to speak, his eyes narrowed. Only then did he notice that there were 5 red fingerprints on Mingyu's face. Unable to suppress the anger in his heart, Ning Chen coldly swept his gaze over the surrounding people who were still eating and watching the show. He icily said, "Everyone, please leave. I'm going to kill someone." The hall was in an uproar. Some people ridiculed him, while others felt that the atmosphere wasn't going to subside and quickly left. However, the majority of people stayed. Ning Chen no longer paid attention to them. He had already warned them. Bang! In the next moment, a white figure flashed. Ning Chen went forward and sent the table flying with a palm strike. At the same time, he directly stepped on one of the youth's face. He revealed his killing intent. "Speak, who did it just now?" "Impudent. Do you know who I am?" The youth struggled on the ground with a pained expression. I don't care who you are. Even if the heavens came today, they wouldn't be able to save you. As soon as he finished speaking, Ningchen kicked the young man and sent him flying. With a loud bang, blood spurted out of the young man's mouth and splattered 10 meters away. It's your turn. Speak, who did it? Ningchen coldly said as he grabbed the other blue-clothed youth. The blue-clothed youth's face was filled with fear. He trembled. You, however, before he could finish his sentence, Ningchen sent another kick flying. The hall was dyed red once more. It's her. The last youth saw Ningchen look over and immediately pointed at the woman beside him. The woman was shocked. Just as she was about to deny it, Ningchen grabbed her throat. Speak, who did it? The dangerous light in Ningchen's eyes grew stronger and stronger. The woman continued to struggle, but she wasn't willing to speak. Ningchen coldly laughed and slowly tightened his grip. He liked stubborn people the most. The woman only felt that it was getting more and more difficult to breathe. Under the desire to live, she unconsciously raised her left hand and said with difficulty, this hand, crack. As soon as she said that, everyone in the hall heard a crack. In the next moment, what they saw was a broken arm. The white bone pierced through the flesh and blood, looking extremely frightening. Several people in the hall couldn't help but vomit. Their faces were pale from fright. Chapter 95. In front of Ningchen, the woman's expression was twisted. She struggled violently, but she couldn't say a word because her throat was being choked. Blood gushed out from the severed arm. It was a shocking sight. At this moment, a Buddhist sigh sounded, benefactor, where it is possible to let people off, one should spare them. Please stop. This sudden voice attracted everyone's attention. Looking over, they saw a plain-clothed monk appear in front of the door. He looked young and benevolent as he slowly walked over. On what basis? Ningchen turned his head and asked indifferently. The heavens are benevolent. I hope young master can be merciful. The plain-clothed monk stopped and bowed. The heavens are benevolent. That's their business. What does it have to do with me? Ningchen grabbed the woman's other arm and snapped it. Blood flowed out once more. She slapped Mingyu, so I broke both her arms. It's fair and just. What can the heavens say? Ningchen's cold eyes and emotionless words provoked everyone present. Ningchen's face was cold and terrifying, causing people to involuntarily shiver. Amitabha. Benefactor, your killing intent is too strong. You've already become a demon. I can't allow you to continue wreaking havoc in the world. The plain-clothed monk's body moved and he stretched out his hand to make a move. Immediately, a strong wind blew towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen was stunned. Clang! The black sword came out of its sheath and blocked the Buddhist palm. Ningchen's eyes narrowed and he slowly said, Unbreakable Vajra body. The plain-clothed monk's Buddhist palm wasn't injured at all. It was as hard as steel. You're a disciple of Du Yi Temple. Ningchen's expression sank. His luck was really good. He had met another peak Shantian's successor. Why would someone from that broken temple appear here? I, Wu Ju, will eliminate this demon for the world today. Wu Ju's palm moved, and the sound of Sanskrit rang out. The golden Buddhist light around him was as brilliant as a saint, illuminating everything within 100 jhang. Buddhist sacred art, Tathagata illuminates the heavens. Idiot! Ningchen snorted coldly. His black sword condensed into frost and stabbed toward the former's eyes. Wu Ju frowned and raised his palm to block the black sword, but his Buddhist technique was interrupted. Ningchen's sword turned around and attacked Wu Ju's eyes, forcing the latter to retreat again and again. Treacherous, evil, and arrogant. How can Wu Ju tolerate you? As soon as he finished speaking, the Buddha closed his eyes. Golden light shone brightly, and the sound of Sanskrit filled the sky. A solemn holy Buddha statue appeared behind him. It was the move of the Buddha in the past. Ningchen focused. His sword drew the frost and snowflakes in the air. His whole body was raised to its peak. Boom! The two moves collided and golden light illuminated the world. However, the ink-colored brilliance broke through the golden light and directly pierced towards Wu Ju's right eye. With his eyes closed, Ning Chen could not move an inch forward. He flipped his right palm and let go of the sword in his hand. Then, he pushed his palm towards the end of the ink sword. With a bang, the Buddha retreated. A drop of dark red blood quietly dripped down from his eyelids. The golden body had already been broken, and the silver sword chi instantly entered. Wu Ju's body trembled, and his mouth was dyed red. Righteous Buddha, where is your Buddha now? Ning Chen sent the former flying with his sword and asked coldly. Jia Wu retreated more than 10 steps and vomited a mouthful of blood. After an instant, he became dispirited. The devil showed mercy, but the Buddha found it difficult to do so. This was the greatest insult to the Buddha. Where had the Buddha of this world cultivated to? Clang, the ink sword returned to its sheath. Ning Chen glanced at the people around him and left a silver ingot to the shopkeeper. Then, he pulled little Mingyu upstairs. With a bang, the door closed. Ning Chen staggered and blood spilled from his mouth. What happened to you? Mingyu was shocked. She hurriedly supported him and asked anxiously. I'm fine. Ning Chen forced a smile. What a powerful Buddhist move. What a powerful indestructible body. If not for this little monk's lack of battle experience, it would have been hard to predict who would have won today. As expected, the monks of the Du-Yi temple were not easy to deal with. It was no wonder that a martial Marquis of the Xia kingdom was guarding there. Ning Chen closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing for a moment, forcibly suppressing his injuries. After a long time, he slowly opened his eyes. In front of him, little Mingyu's eyes were still filled with worry. The handprint on her face was also becoming more and more obvious. Ning Chen's heart flashed with self-blame. He had said that he would protect her, but he had let her suffer so much. Does it still hurt? Ning Chen carefully caressed the little girl's delicate face and gently asked. It doesn't hurt anymore. Mingyu shook her head and replied. I've let you suffer, Ning Chen said apologetically. It's fine. Mingyu bit her lips and held back her tears. Ning Chen gently pulled the little girl into his embrace and firmly promised, there won't be a next time. Okay. Mingyu finally couldn't hold back her tears. The empress of a dynasty was being humiliated here. The little girl had endured it for a long time. Ning Chen lightly sighed. He felt very uncomfortable. I almost forgot. Your fish. Ning Chen took out the grilled fish from his bosom. Fortunately, it hadn't turned cold yet. Mingyu got up from his embrace and smiled through her tears. She took the already flattened grilled fish and ate it like it was a treasure. Ning Chen pulled the little girl to the bed and had her sit on it. He sat down and immediately activated the life scroll. A silver light flowed from his left hand and entered the handprint on little Mingyu's face. Mingyu only felt a cool sensation on her face. The burning pain from before quickly lessened by a lot. Ning Chen took out an amulet from his bosom and put it around the little girl's neck. This was something he had when he woke up. It was tied together with the moon-shaped jade pendant. Zhang Sun must have put it on him when he was unconscious. Now that he had no use for it, he gave it to little Mingyu as a small gift. Tomorrow, we'll be going to Grand Xia. It might be dangerous, but I'll protect you, Ning Chen said softly. Okay. Mingyu didn't refute. She knew that Ning Chen wouldn't change his mind. Although he was very good to her and was even obedient to her, when it came to matters of principle, he definitely wouldn't compromise. Quickly go to sleep. We still have to hurry tomorrow morning, Ning Chen said as he rubbed the little girl's hair. Okay. Mingyu obediently lay down and closed her eyes. Ning Chen walked to the side and extinguished the candle. Soon after, he walked over to a table not far from the bed and sat down. After today's battle, he discovered that he was still barely able to fight against these Xiantian successors. The number of moves he had learned was too few. He only had one move that Jian Consecrator had taught him. There was one move in the life scroll. Unfortunately, he hadn't learned it. And even if he did, he wouldn't be able to use it. The price was too great. He couldn't bear it. As for the other heavenly scroll, the dust scroll, the requirements for the moves recorded in it were too high. Unless one was a Xiantian, they couldn't be of any help to him. For now, if he wanted to increase his strength as quickly as possible, the best way was to obtain as many moves as possible. This wasn't an easy task. The majority of the world's cultivation methods were controlled by various powers. If he wanted to obtain them, he would have to pay a hefty price. In this world, the only person he had never seen other people's moves was Prince Yen. With Senior's talent, he didn't need to learn other people's moves. All of his moves were created by himself. Thinking of this, Ning Chen suddenly remembered the two shocking sword auras he saw in the desert that day. One of them must have belonged to Senior. Thinking about it carefully, he could roughly deduce the other one. In this world, only the sword in Sword City was comparable to a Xiantian expert. Senior went to the desert to find a sand sword. It was very likely that the sword in Sword City was also there for the same purpose. It was just that he didn't know how Senior was doing now. He said that he would look for him after he found the sand sword. But until now, Senior still hadn't appeared. He didn't doubt Senior's strength. However, the sword in Sword City was comparable to the 5 strongest Xiantian experts in the world. He couldn't help but be worried. After returning to the Great Xia, he would try his best to find out more about Senior. If he really couldn't, he would have to ask Zhang Sun for help. The night passed quickly. The next morning, little Mingyu woke up and the two of them set off. Mingyu didn't want to go to the Great Xia so quickly. Most of the time, she wanted to walk by herself. Ning Chen also let her be. Only when the little girl was tired, he would carry her on his back and speed up. The speed of a 7th-grade martial artist when rushing at full speed was very frightening. Moreover, Ning Chen had cultivated the life scroll and his foundation was unparalleled in the world. His Jinqi recovery speed was much faster than ordinary 7th-grade martial artists. He basically didn't need to rest along the way. After 2 days and 1 night, even if little Mingyu didn't cooperate, the two of them still arrived at the border between the two dynasties, Beizhong Plains. This was the place where the war between the two dynasties took place. Broken spears and flags could be seen everywhere. Too many corpses of Great Xia soldiers were buried in the hundreds of miles of Beizhong Plains. The lonely night was cold and the cold moon shone alone. The night in Beizhong Plains was frighteningly cold. The cold wind whistled and the yin qi was bone-chilling. Ning Chen held little Mingyu's hand as they walked through the northern plains. He looked at the corpses of the soldiers that littered the ground. Out of 100,000 soldiers, only less than 40,000 were left. It was an unbelievable defeat, turning the northern plains into a land of no return. The two of them silently walked in the city, their hearts gradually sinking. Step by step, they only saw broken spears and young faces. There was no fear of death, only reluctance to part with their loved ones. My blood, my bones, from now on, may the heavens take pity on me. I hope that after death, I will become a war spirit and protect the land of Great Xia forever. Beside the fallen general, 27 words were written in blood on a broken flag. Ning Chen silently bent down and picked up the blood-stained flag, his heart heavy. Beiwu Marquis deserves to die. Ning Chen's hands cracked. The corpses of tens of thousands of soldiers could not be buried. Beiwu Marquis' sins could not be redeemed even with 10,000 deaths. Little Mingyu was silent. She took in the bleakness in her eyes. Facing the soldiers who used their lives to protect the land behind them, all words seemed to pale in comparison. All differences and standpoints, all schemes had disappeared along with the lives that had been lost. All that was left was the deepest respect for the soldiers who used their blood to protect their country. There shouldn't be war. Mingyu said softly. If you are in power, you have to worry about the people. I don't know if the division between countries is right or wrong, but the existence of war is definitely wrong. Ning Chen said solemnly. Mingyu nodded, taking Ning Chen's words into her heart. Chapter 96. Little Mingyu was not used to the coldness of Beizhong Plain, so Ning Chen carried her on his back and left quickly. He planted a seed of peace for little Mingyu, hoping that one day, she would grow stronger. He could not change Fan Lingyue, so he could only try to change the future ruler of Beimeng. The world had been ravaged by war for too long and could not continue fighting. After passing through Beizhong Plain, Great Xia's Xingqiao Pass was not far away. Ning Chen and little Mingyu walked for an entire night and finally reached their destination before noon the next day. Ning Chen put on the mask that he had prepared beforehand and disguised himself as a middle-aged man. He held little Mingyu's hand and openly walked into Xingqiao Pass. Xingqiao Pass was currently guarded by Marquis Qinghe. Before the war between the two dynasties ended, this Marquis with the highest seniority in Great Xia would continue to guard this place. Great Xia had already lost Yangue City and could not afford to lose Xingqiao Pass. After Ning Chen arrived at Xingqiao Pass, he first brought little Mingyu to an inn and then asked the little girl to make a mask for him. "Where are you going?" Mingyu asked curiously as she helped the bad guy with his makeup. "To the Marquis government," Ning Chen said honestly. The old Marquis of Xingqiao Pass was Zhang Xuan's father. He had received too much kindness from Zhang Xuan's family. Since he was here, he had to pay him a visit. Oh, Mingyu nodded and did not ask further. Once she heard this, she knew very well that she could not follow. "Be careful," Mingyu reminded him. "I'm fine," Ning Chen replied calmly. Although he heard that the old Marquis was somewhat old-fashioned, he could not be impolite this time. After the mask was done, it would take about an hour to dry. Ning Chen calmed down and thought for a while before taking out a brush and ink. He took out the moon-shaped jade pendant and dipped it in the ink before gently imprinting it on the paper. Mingyu's face was filled with worry. She had a feeling that the bad guy's trip would not go smoothly. Ning Chen saw the worry in the little girl's eyes and reached out to rub her hair. He said softly, "Don't worry, nothing will happen." After waiting for a while, Ning Chen took off the mask on his face and changed into his original middle-aged appearance. He then got up and walked out of the door. "Wait for me to return." Ning Chen left with a solemn expression. He hoped that nothing bad would happen to him. The temporary Wuhou government in the Qing dynasty pass was about an hour's journey from the inn. Before Ning Chen reached the Wuhou government, he purposely found a secluded place to change his mask. When he appeared again, he was already an ordinary-looking young man. After half an hour, Ning Chen finally arrived at the Wuhou government. In front of the government, there were two guards dressed in battle armor, standing upright. "I have a matter to discuss with the Marshal Marquis. I hope that the general can pass the message on my behalf." Ning Chen took out the letter in his hand and handed it over to one of the guards as he spoke politely. "Wait here." The guard took the letter. He didn't say anything superfluous and didn't make things difficult for him. He turned around and walked into the mansion. A moment later, the guard returned and respectfully said, "The Marquis invites you in." Ning Chen thanked the guard and walked into the Wuhou government. In the main hall of the Marquis Manor, Marquis Qinghe sat quietly on the main seat. His face was slightly aged and he looked to be in his 50s. However, he had a righteous aura that was very oppressive. "You're Ning Chen." Marquis Clear River sized up the young man before him and spoke calmly. "That's right." Ning Chen nodded. "You don't look like the portrait that Wu Yu gave me. Take off the mask." Marquis Qinghe said indifferently. "Ah, as expected, I can't hide from the Marquis." Ning Chen removed the mask and revealed his true face. He then respectfully bowed. "Junior Ning Chen greets the Marquis." "Not bad." Marquis Qinghe nodded. His calmness had a trace of praise. You were the one who kidnapped Northern Meng's young emperor, right? Marquis Qinghe's tone didn't have much surprise as he asked. Yes. Ning Chen did not deny it and nodded. There are 2 letters here. One is from His Majesty and the other is from Wu Yu. Take a look. While speaking, Marquis Qinghe's hand moved and the 2 letters turned into a stream of light that flew towards Ning Chen. Ning Chen received the 2 letters. After opening them, he read them one by one. There was no change in his expression. He already knew the attitude of Emperor Xia and Chang Sunday. Now that he read it again, he wouldn't be surprised. Emperor Xia's letter clearly stated that once he was discovered to have entered Xingqiao Pass, he was to immediately stop him at all costs, regardless of life or death. As for Northern Meng's young emperor, he had to be sent back to the imperial city alive. As expected, Chang Sun's letter tactfully begged for mercy. Between the words and the brush, he did his best to ask for Ning Chen to hand over the young emperor voluntarily. Finally, he repeatedly warned his father not to use force. The 2 letters with completely different tones represented the final attitude of the current emperor and empress of the Grand Xia. This was unfortunate for Ning Chen, but also an honor. What are your thoughts? Marquis Qinghe asked. I don't have any thoughts. I already expected this. Ning Chen waved his hand and returned the letter. This is Emperor Xia's world. His Majesty's words are imperial edicts. This is Grand Xia's world, not Emperor Xia's. As for imperial edicts, they are meaningless to me, Ning Chen said coldly. Outrageous. Marquis Qinghe's expression immediately sank. He coldly snorted and said, Men, capture this brat for me. Yes. As soon as he finished speaking, the 4 generals entered and quickly surrounded Ning Chen. Senior Marquis, I only came to visit you because you are the Emperor's father. This is my due courtesy. However, that doesn't mean that I will give up without a fight. Ning Chen's expression also sank. Then let me see what you're capable of. Attack! Marquis Qinghe shouted coldly. Clang, clang. The 4 generals unsheathed their swords, and a powerful stench of blood wafted out. These generals who had been through hundreds of battles were abnormally powerful. Each one of them was at least at rank 8. Ning Chen's expression became extremely grave. His feet moved, and he took the initiative to attack. His figure flashed, and the black sword wrapped in cloth appeared behind him. His sword light slashed down towards one of the generals. Bang! The swords and sabers collided. Ning Chen used his peerless foundation to force the general back half a step. However, at the same time, 3 sword lights arrived behind him. He couldn't get away in that half a step. Ning Chen's body trembled. His sword light turned around and knocked away 2 of the sword lights. The powerful backlash caused his blood and qi to churn. The final attack was unavoidable. Ning Chen's left hand formed a sword finger. True qi overflowed, and he met the general's attack head-on. The 2 sword fingers collided. Ning Chen was unable to use the power of the sword qi. The sword qi entered his body, and blood flowed out of his mouth. Seeing that there was no advantage in this prolonged battle, Ning Chen made a prompt decision. His sword moved, and snow filled the sky. He raised his cultivation to its peak. Flying swan feather, one sword of heaven and earth. His sword was as fast as lightning, and it once more shot towards the general who had already retreated half a step. Then with a boom, the general received the attack and retreated several steps. Ning Chen took a step forward, wanting to leave. However, at this moment, Marquis Qinghe attacked. His body was like a streak of light, and he instantly arrived in front of Ning Chen. His finger pierced through his forehead. Bang! Ning Chen's body trembled, and he was suddenly sent flying. He vomited blood, and it dyed the sky. In this moment of life and death, Ning Chen forcefully endured the pain all over his body. He took a step forward, and using the remaining force, he turned and rushed out of the Marquis estate. Chase him! We must capture him alive and ask him where the Northern Meng Emperor is. Marquis Qinghe's face sunk. Yes. The 4 generals accepted the order and quickly chased after him. Seeing the 4 of them disappear, Marquis Qinghe glanced at the darkness and sighed. He then turned and walked into the hall. Wuyo, this is all your father can do. The rest will depend on his own luck. Ning Chen immediately put on his mask after escaping the Marquis estate. Blood continuously flowed from his mouth as he staggered toward the crowd. The 4 generals followed closely behind him. They chased him for over 10 streets, but they lost him in front of an inn. Go in and search, said one of the generals. Yes. The remaining 3 generals nodded and walked in together. The inn's manager was just about to stop them, but when he saw that it was the 4 armored generals, he immediately shut his mouth. On the 2nd floor, the door to a room was pushed open with a bang. Little Mingyue jumped in fright, but when she saw that it was Ning Chen, she let out a sigh of relief. There will be people coming in a bit. Help me cover up. Ning Chen endured his injuries and quickly said. Okay. Mingyue saw that his expression was not right and quickly agreed. Ning Chen quickly took off his outer clothes and stuffed them into the bedside cabinet. Then, he lay down on the bed. Dang dang. The next moment, there was a knock on the door. Before little Mingyue could open the door, a general pushed the door open and entered. Sir, sir. Mingyue pretended to panic and took 2 steps back as she spoke timidly. The general saw that it was a little girl and frowned. He walked into the room and looked around. When he saw the pale and sickly middle-aged man on the bed, he dispelled his doubts and turned to leave. Mingyue closed the door. Just as she walked to the bedside, she saw Ning Chen spit out a mouthful of blood. He covered his mouth and coughed. What's wrong? Don't scare me. Little Mingyue panicked. She used her sleeve to wipe the blood from his mouth, but no matter how hard she tried, she could not wipe it all away. Marquis Qinghe did not hold back in his last move. There were too many spies in the Marquis estate, so he could not hold back. I'm fine. Ning Chen gently pushed little Mingyue away and sat on the bed to rest. When he attacked just now, he really thought that he might not be able to come back. He thought that the conversation would not go smoothly and might even end on bad terms. However, on account of Zhang Sun, Marquis Qinghe would not be too ruthless. He did not expect Marquis Qinghe's attitude to be so intense. It was only after that finger attack that he instantly understood that Marquis Qinghe was acting for the people in the dark. That finger attack did not hold back, but there were many more things. The cultivation technique of Zhang Sun's lineage and the old Marquis's 10 years of cultivation. This was already his limit. The old Marquis was at the peak of rank 9 and was even a half-step in born expert. 10 years of cultivation was enough to forcefully raise an ordinary person without any foundation above rank 5. In his dantian, the 2 cyclones were constantly devouring the endless energy that was pouring in. Ning Chen's cultivation was also constantly rising. Late stage rank 7, peak rank 7, early stage rank 8, mid-stage rank 8, late stage rank 8, peak rank 8. However, just as his cultivation was about to break through to rank 9, Ning Chen forcefully stopped the expansion of the cyclones and forcefully suppressed his realm. He could not break through to rank 9 yet. Otherwise, his foundation would be unstable and it would affect his future cultivation. After a moment, Ning Chen slowly opened his eyes and sighed in his heart. The old Marquis had given him too much of a favor. Chapter 97. Marquis Qinghe's loyalty to Great Xia had never been doubted. This old Marquis was bestowed the title of Marquis by the late Emperor. He had spent his entire life guarding the borders of Great Xia and had worked hard without any complaints. The peace of de Xia was fought for by generations of martial marquises. The borders of de Xia were too big. If not for these martial marquises, they would have been trampled into a wasteland by the cavalry of other dynasties. As the only surviving martial marquis of the previous generation, Marquis Qinghe's prestige in Xia was unparalleled. Even Marquis Kaishian, who was the head of the 10 martial marquises, could not compare. However, Emperor Xia's recent actions had chilled the heart of this old marquis. Marquis government. Marquis Qinghe stood in the middle of the hall. In front of him, 4 generals were kneeling, looking ashamed. Forfeit your salary for 3 months. Go back, Marquis Qinghe said indifferently. Yes. The 4 generals bowed respectfully, then stood up and left. After the 4 of them left, Marquis Qinghe quietly looked out of Marquis government. His calm eyes flashed with deep fatigue. Xia, who had been invincible for 1,000 years, had fallen to the point where they had to rely on a young man to support them. How sad, how laughable. He knew from Wuyo that Ning Chen had already sent the news of Marquis Beiwu's betrayal to the imperial city. However, he did not expect that Emperor Xia, in order to lure out the rebel forces within Xia, would watch as Yangue city was destroyed. In the end, the 170,000 soldiers and millions of civilians were completely slaughtered by the northern Meng army. It could be said that half of Xia's precarious situation was caused by Emperor Xia's own hands. As a subject, he had to be loyal to Emperor Xia. However, he was even more loyal to Xia that he had protected for his entire life. He was very clear about what Ning Chen had done. It could even be said that if not for this young man, Xia would be in an even worse state in this war. He believed in his own judgment, and even more so in his daughter's judgment of people. Therefore, he was willing to take a gamble. 10 years of cultivation was nothing to him. He would not be able to enter the Xiantian realm in this lifetime. He might as well help this young man this once. He only hoped that his decision this time would bring new hope to Xia, and not the beginning of destruction. Ning Chen didn't know what the old marquis was thinking, but he knew that he owed him a favor that could never be repaid. 10 years of cultivation was not something that any martial artist could casually give up, not to mention that the old marquis was already very old. Losing 10 years of cultivation would definitely cause great damage to his vitality and even cause permanent damage to his own foundation. Mingyu had been quietly guarding by the bedside, her delicate little face filled with worry. It's fine now. Ning Chen woke up from his meditation and rubbed the little girl's hair. Although the injuries on his body were not light, they were nothing compared to what he had obtained. He couldn't stay in this any longer. He and little Mingyue had to leave as soon as possible. He had wasted a lot of time recuperating, and the sky outside was gradually darkening. However, this was a good thing for them. Every day at this time was the time when people who left early and returned late returned home. There were relatively more pedestrians on the streets. In addition, the sky was dark, which made it more convenient for them to leave. Let's go. Thinking of this, Ning Chen put on his coat, held Mingyu's hand, and walked out of the door. Along the way, the pedestrians walked back and forth. The 2 of them didn't stand out as they walked, and soon disappeared into the night. In the next 2 days, the Qing dynasty pass was under martial law. The places where Ning Chen had appeared were checked over and over again. No one knew that Ning Chen had brought little Mingyue to another city 300 li away from the Qing dynasty pass, and they had stayed there for 5 days. His injuries couldn't be delayed any longer. He had to calm down and heal. Moreover, he needed time to cultivate the cultivation method that the old marquis had given him. This was the martial arts of the Zhangsun branch. There were mental cultivation methods and moves. He didn't lack mental cultivation methods. What he lacked was the method to cultivate the moves. There were very few sword moves in the martial arts of the Zhangsun branch. Moreover, the old marquis and the Marquis of Taiping weren't sword users. Fortunately, he didn't have to learn sword moves. He wasn't a sword fanatic like Prince Yan. He didn't mind learning any martial arts as long as it was useful. In the path of martial arts, the most taboo was to be impatient. Ning Chen didn't dare to learn too much. He only chose one sword move and one of the 3 palms. The old marquis only taught one sword move and 3 palms. He was probably afraid that Ning Chen was young and impetuous and would be greedy. Any martial arts in the world had its unique way of cultivating. Ning Chen spent 5 days healing and cultivating before he had a preliminary grasp of the sword move and the palm move. 5 days later, Ning Chen took little Mingyue on the road again. They needed to get to the Heaven's Gate as soon as possible. After another 3 days, the two of them came to 5 li away from the Heaven's Gate and stopped moving forward. Ning Chen looked at the mighty Great Xia Pass in front of him, knowing that this was the last problem in front of him. It was definitely impossible to force their way through. Fan Lingyue must have left a real powerhouse in this extremely important place. If they forced their way through, they would only be courting death. The only choice was to pass through the Qizhou mountain range on both sides of the Heaven's Gate. The Qizhou mountain range stretched for nearly 10,000 li, forcibly dividing the territory of the Great Xia into 2 halves. The place where the Heaven's Gate was located was the most gentle of the mountains, but it still took a lot of manpower and material resources of the Great Xia to build. The Qizhou mountain range was a true primitive land. Very few people dared to set foot in it. However, Ning Chen had no choice but to pass through it. "Are you scared?" Ning Chen looked at the little girl beside him and asked. "No." Mingyue nodded firmly. She was the empress of the northern Meng, how could she be scared by such a small difficulty? "Good job." Ning Chen gave her a thumbs up. As they spoke, the two of them had already set foot on the road across the Qizhou mountain range. The mountain road was rugged and every step was very difficult. The little girl's body was still very weak. She would be exhausted after a few steps, so most of the time, Ning Chen carried her on his back. The primitive land was tens of thousands of li long, rolling up and down on the ground. Ancient trees were coiled up, covering the sky and the sun. There were also old roots that were intertwined, spreading horizontally and vertically, overflowing with the aura of time. This was a divine land that had gathered the essence of heaven and earth, nourished for tens of thousands of years. It had existed since ancient times. From time to time, there would be the roars of giant beasts and the cries of hundreds of birds. It was full of vitality. There was also a dense fog that rose and fell, flickering, and its source could not be seen. It was somewhat mysterious and unpredictable. The cold moon hung in the sky, bright and clear. Gusts of cold wind blew gently, rustling the branches and leaves. The whole mountain range was gloomy and somewhat scary. Even the roars of beasts could not hide the loneliness of eternity. "Are you cold?" Ning Chen asked softly as they walked on the mountain road. "No." Mingyue leaned on his back and gently shook her head. The bad guy's body was very warm, and she was wearing very thick clothes. "If you're tired, sleep for a while. We still have a long way to go," Ning Chen said. "Okay." Mingyue replied, but she was not sleepy. Her pearl-like eyes were wide open. "Do you want me to tell you a story?" After walking for a while, Ning Chen saw that little Mingyue was still not sleepy. He was afraid that she would be bored, so he suggested. "Okay." Mingyue nodded, agreeing wholeheartedly. "I'll tell you a story about Snow White." Ning Chen recalled carefully. He did not know if he could still remember everything after not telling it for so many years. Once upon a time, there was a king. The beginning of the story was very vulgar, the middle was very complicated, but the ending was very beautiful. It was a typical fairy tale of a prince, a princess, and a bad guy. Ning Chen's mouth could even make dead things come alive, let alone telling a story. Little Mingyue was very engrossed in the story. Ning Chen smiled in his heart. She was a little girl after all. Does Fan Lingyue look like that bad queen? Ning Chen took the opportunity to instill in little Mingyue the idea that Fan Lingyue was a bad guy. "You're the bad guy. Sister Lingyue is a good person." Little Mingyue's ability to distinguish right from wrong was very strong. She could tell Ning Chen's intention at a glance. She pouted and replied. Ning Chen rubbed his nose helplessly. His strategy had failed, and there was room for improvement. If Fan Lingyue and I fell into the water together, who would you save first? Ningchen once again took out his trump card. Sister Lingyue. Little Mingyue said without hesitation. I doted on you for nothing. Ningchen was very hurt. The little girl answered too quickly. It would have been good even if she pretended to hesitate. Your martial arts are so good, you can last for a long time. Sister Lingyue doesn't know martial arts, so I must save Sister Lingyue first. Mingyue hugged the bad guy's arms tightly and explained softly. Ha! Ningchen laughed softly. If Fan Lingyue didn't know martial arts, then there wouldn't be any martial arts in the world. That palm strike almost killed him. However, he couldn't tell little Mingyue these things. Why don't you tell me a story? Ningchen suggested. I don't know. The little girl said with difficulty. Then I'll tell you a joke. Ningchen smiled strangely. Okay. Mingyue nodded. Once upon a time, there was a eunuch. Ningchen opened his mouth and said nothing else. What happened next? Mingyue asked curiously. Nothing else. Ningchen replied. Mingyue was stunned. After a long time, she finally reacted. She hit the former hard with her little hand and said with a red face, You're a bad guy. Ha, I'm just joking. Ningchen laughed and continued, Why don't I tell you a new story? No, I want to hear a story. Mingyue pouted. What kind of story? Ningchen asked. Little Mingyue thought for a while and said, Why don't you tell me about yourself? She knew that there weren't many people in this world who could make Sister Lingyue pay attention to them. Since the bad guy was so powerful, he must have a lot of stories to tell. Ningchen didn't refuse. Wasn't it just telling stories about heroes? He was the best at it. Once upon a time, there was a young, handsome, confident, kind and cute boy who entered the palace. The story was very long, mainly because a certain someone had shamelessly added too many exaggerated adjectives, resulting in a story that could be written on a palm-sized piece of paper taking more than 2 hours to reach the part where he fell off the cliff. You don't know how big that strange bird was when I fell down. Its wings were as wide as 4 to 5 feet. Ningchen was in the midst of telling the story vividly but was interrupted by little Mingyue without giving him any face. You're lying. How can there be such a big bird? The other plots may be slightly exaggerated, but I didn't exaggerate at all about this. That's... Ningchen was about to explain when he suddenly heard a deep roar coming from the sky. His calm face instantly darkened. This time, there was no need to explain. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.